Pamela Clark, 32 years old, stood on the Guggenheim spiraling ramp just before the museum opened. The morning sunlight filtered through the glass dome, illuminating her thoughtful expression as she studied a contemporary installation piece comprising suspended shards of mirrored glass. Her reflection flickered across the fragments in a disjointed pattern, echoing the way she often felt about her own life. Tall and slender, with hazelnut brown hair pinned in a loose bun, Pamela had a gaze that combined curiosity and reserve. Her greenish-brown eyes, alert and contemplative, suggested a soul more comfortable observing than participating. She was a junior curator, a role she both cherished and found stifling. While her position at the Guggenheim gave her access to world-class art, it also anchored her in the routine of drafting proposals and catering to the tastes of those higher up in the hierarchy. Still, she found solace in the museum's vibrant yet hushed atmosphere. The Guggenheim's iconic interior, with its smooth, winding walkways and pristine white walls, felt like a kind of sanctuary for her quiet spirit. Even so, she couldn't shake a subtle restlessness that nibbled at the edges of her contentment. Drawing a slim, leather-bound diary from her shoulder bag, Pamela flipped open its worn pages. This journal, soft brown leather, scuffed at the corners, was her most guarded possession. Here, she recorded not just her impressions of art, but also private reflections, frustrations, and hopes she had never voiced aloud. She clicked a pen and jotted a few lines describing the installation's effect. Shards of glass, a million possibilities refracting our unseen selves. Then, in a smaller scrawl, she added, "Sometimes I wonder if my own reflection is just as fractured." Behind her, a voice cleared its throat. "Getting an early start, I see," came Mark Johnson's measured tone. Mark, 38, wore a crisp navy suit and a self-assured smile that often bordered on condescending. He was one of the museum's more ambitious curators, perpetually vying for influence in upcoming projects. Tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably groomed, he conveyed an air of confidence that made Pamela feel uneasy. "Good morning," she said softly, sliding the diary back into her bag with a quick, almost protective movement. "Planning for the new digital exhibit, I presume?" he asked. "Dr. Peterson wants fresh angles, but be mindful. Some of the higher-ups aren't exactly fans of these experimental directions." His eyes flicked to her bag, though he said nothing about it. "Anyway, keep me posted." He offered a tight smile, turned on his polished shoes, and headed off. Pamela exhaled as if releasing pent-up tension. One part of her admired Mark's drive, another part disliked his subtle dismissal of her ideas. Though they were colleagues, she often suspected he doubted her capabilities because of her soft-spoken manner. She reminded herself that she was here for a reason. She had earned her place at the Guggenheim through hard work, academic excellence, and a sincere passion for art. Dr. Francis Peterson, the museum's 60-year-old chief curator, was more encouraging. A few moments later, she found him in his office, a bright room adorned with framed posters of past exhibitions. He greeted her warmly, his wire-rimmed glasses sliding down his nose. "Pamela, just the person I wanted to see," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "The museum's trustees are very interested in showcasing emerging trends, especially digital art. I'd like you to prepare some initial notes on a show we're calling Digital Horizons. You have an eye for innovative talent, and I believe in your instincts." Pamela's heart fluttered. This was the first time Dr. Peterson had openly recognized her forward-thinking tastes. "Thank you," she replied, trying to keep the gratitude out of her voice and maintain composure. "I'll put together a proposal this week." When she left his office, the spiraling ramps felt a little less intimidating. Even so, a twinge of anxiety gnawed at her. She had bold ideas, installations involving interactive holograms and immersive VR experiences, But she wasn't entirely sure how Mark would react, or the trustees, for that matter. They were known for occasional reluctance toward unconventional concepts. At lunchtime, Pamela escaped to a quiet alcove in the museum, close to a window that overlooked Fifth Avenue. She retrieved her diary again, scribbling down scattered thoughts. Meeting with Dr. Peterson. Promising. Mark remains a looming shadow, though. Why is it easier to confide in these pages than to speak my mind in meetings? She paused, tapping her pen against the page. Through that diary, she could voice all the complexities inside her, her longing for deeper human connection, the gnawing emptiness of living alone in her Upper East Side apartment, and the faint hope that one day her quiet nature wouldn't be mistaken for lack of passion. She closed the diary gently, her palm lingering on the worn cover. It was a repository of everything she had never dared share. Even the few close friends she had, like Olivia Chen, knew only parts of Pamela's introspective world. The thought of someone reading those confessions made her pulse quicken, but she clung to the notion that the diary was safe, always by her side. Looking once more at the suspended glass installation, Pamela caught her reflection in a razor-thin shard. She wondered if, beyond its fragmented surface, there might be a clearer, more courageous version of herself waiting to emerge. For now, she remained an observer in her own life, scribbling secret desires into a battered notebook and clinging to the hope that, in the swirl of New York's cultural epicenter, she might finally find the connection her heart silently craved. The next morning, Pamela slipped out of her Upper East Side apartment, a modest pre-war studio with tall windows and scuffed wooden floors. She buttoned her long beige coat against the brisk wind and made her way toward Madison Avenue. Her routine was as familiar as it was predictable. First, a stop at Ralph's Coffee for an Americano, then the short walk down to the Guggenheim. Yet beneath that comfortable rhythm, a new undercurrent of excitement stirred. Dr. Peterson had entrusted her with a prominent role in shaping the digital horizons concept. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. Stepping into Ralph's Coffee, she inhaled the warm smell of freshly ground beans. Waiters in green aprons bustled behind the marble counter, preparing pastries and specialty brews for the morning crowd. Pamela spotted her best friend, Olivia Chen, waving from a corner table. Olivia, 33, with sleek black hair and a chic pantsuit, exuded a confident energy that Pamela simultaneously admired and found a little intimidating. "I already grabbed you an Americano," Olivia said, sliding a paper cup toward her. "You look like you've got a million things on your mind." Pamela shrugged out of her coat and settled into the wooden chair across from her friend. "Dr. Peterson asked me to outline a vision for that digital art exhibit." "I'm excited, but also worried. Mark's already making comments about how radical some ideas might seem." "He's threatened," Olivia said simply, smoothing the sleeve of her blazer. "People who think inside the box get nervous when someone with real creativity comes along." Pamela laughed softly, grateful for Olivia's unwavering support. "You've got a knack for making me feel braver than I am. When I talked to Mark yesterday, it felt like a brush-off. But Dr. Peterson wants me to push forward?" "Exactly," Olivia said. "Push forward." She took a sip of her latte. "And while you're at it, I want to hear about more than just your work. Any new sparks in your social life? You know, I keep telling you I have this colleague." Pamela raised a hand in good-humored surrender. "Let's not go there yet. The last time you set me up on a date, it was awkward beyond belief." Olivia leaned in conspiratorially. "Hey, not my fault he turned out to be obsessed with competitive axe throwing, but all jokes aside, you deserve happiness, Pam. You can't keep all your hopes and dreams locked in that leather notebook." Pamela's cheeks warmed. She gripped her coffee cup, feeling the heat against her palms. "Sometimes the diary's easier, People can judge you face to face. A notebook won't. That's exactly why you need to get out of your comfort zone, Olivia insisted. Anyway, just think about it. Meanwhile, you better wow those museum folks with your digital art ideas, mark or no mark. Reassured by Olivia's words, Pamela downed the last of her Americano. They parted ways outside, exchanging quick hugs before Pamela headed on toward the Guggenheim. Her mind swirled with possibilities for digital horizons. She envisioned interactive installations that captured the pulse of New York. Visitors scanning personal data to transform their silhouettes into glowing digital art, or augmented reality experiences that layered historical imagery over present-day cityscapes. At the museum, she navigated bustling corridors lined with promotional posters. In the curatorial office, she prepared slides to illustrate her ideas, images of avant-garde artists working with virtual reality, short video snippets from technology conferences, and conceptual sketches from her own notes. But a gnawing worry persisted. She needed the department's backing to secure funding, and Mark Johnson had a knack for swaying the board with his connections and charm. Around noon, Dr. Peterson peeked into her workspace. "Pamela, looking good," he said, eyeing the draft slides on her monitor. "Don't forget, we have a meeting at 3 to go over your pitch. I'll be there, and Mark as well." Her stomach fluttered. "I'll be ready, Dr. Peterson." For the next few hours, she meticulously refined her presentation, double-checking facts and citing examples from international museums that had successfully showcased interactive digital art. She wanted to preempt any criticism by providing solid evidence of the genre's popularity and significance. Shortly before the meeting, she slipped into a quiet corner near the museum's coat check to open her diary. She scribbled down a quick note. "Opportunity knocks. Fear knocks louder. Must I always feel overshadowed by my own anxieties?" She paused, considering whether to add more. Instead, she closed the diary and held it briefly against her chest, drawing a slow breath. The act offered her a small reassurance, a reminder that, beneath her outward hesitation, she possessed genuine conviction. At 3 o'clock sharp, she stepped into the conference room. Mark Johnson was already there, leaning back with arms folded, a faint smirk on his lips. Dr. Peterson sat at the head of the table, gesturing for Pamela to begin. With her heart pounding, she launched into her pitch, voice quavering at first but growing steadier as she spoke about immersive experiences, bridging technology with art, and how digital horizons could place the Guggenheim at the forefront of contemporary curatorial innovation. When she finished, silence filled the room. Mark's face remained impassive. Finally, Dr. Peterson cleared his throat. "Excellent work, Pamela. We'll discuss next steps, but I'm impressed." Relieved, she nodded politely, though her mind still lingered on Mark's unreadable expression. She couldn't guess what lay ahead, but for now, there was a glimmer of hope that her vision might find its rightful place at the museum, and perhaps in her life, something else might finally break free from the routine she had come to accept as unchangeable. Early the next day, Pamela shuffled onto the Lexington Avenue line, balancing her tote bag and the leather-bound diary in one hand while juggling a stack of research papers in the other. After a restless night spent revising her digital exhibition concepts, she felt drained but determined. She stood pressed among the crowd in the subway car, the overhead lights casting a pale glow on passengers lost in their phones or in half-asleep gazes. She usually preferred quieter commutes, but her schedule was tight. An important meeting awaited at the Guggenheim, where she would refine her pitch based on feedback from Dr. Peterson and, reluctantly, Mark Johnson. The train jolted forward, nearly causing her to drop her documents. She tightened her grip on the diary, never fully trusting the jostling throngs in Manhattan's rush hour. By the time the train screeched to a halt at 86th Street Station, Pamela realized her stop had arrived. Fighting the surge of people pushing to exit, she hastily maneuvered around shoulders and elbows. In the flurry of her exit, a small slip went unnoticed. Her precious diary tumbled off the stack of papers and onto a seat, hidden momentarily behind a discarded newspaper. Stepping onto the platform, she exhaled, grateful to escape the crush inside the train. Only once the subway doors slid shut and the train vanished down the tunnel did she sense something amiss. A wave of panic struck. Her hand was empty where the diary should have been. She spun around, heart pounding, but it was too late. The train roared away, carrying her most intimate thoughts with it. Across town, Roger Whitman, CEO of Whitman Tech, settled into an unassuming subway seat he rarely occupied. He had chosen the subway this morning to avoid a gridlocked midtown commute and keep a critical investor meeting on schedule. He wore a tailored grey suit and, at 35, carried himself with a poised confidence. People sometimes recognized him from business magazines, but in the swirl of morning transit, he was just another commuter. As the train pulled away from 86th Street, Roger noticed a slim leather notebook lying by the seat next to him, partially covered by a crumpled newspaper. He picked it up, flipping open the cover to see if there was an owner's name. Instead, the first page contained a neatly written quote, "Art is the lie that enables us to realize the truth." Beneath it, in smaller handwriting, was a reflection. "We all wear masks, but sometimes I yearn for someone who sees me unguarded." He found himself strangely drawn to the honesty of those words. He glanced around, unsure what to do. Typically, he'd drop lost items at the station's Lost and Found, but curiosity got the better of him. If the notebook held contact details, returning it might be simpler. He thumbed through a few pages, noticing they were filled with observations about New York City's galleries, fleeting personal fears, and half-finished sketches of exhibit concepts. The entries were so genuine, so unfiltered, that they struck a chord he'd long suppressed. At the next stop, a new wave of passengers flooded in, obscuring Roger from view. He closed the diary, feeling as though he'd intruded into someone's private universe. He resolved to see if there was a phone number scrawled somewhere within, then deliver it accordingly, even as he thought that he felt an unexpected pang of regret at the idea of simply handing it over without reading more, an unsettling mixture of guilt and intrigue. On the station platform above, Pamela's stomach churned. She paced back and forth, telling herself it couldn't be gone forever. "I'll check the MTA's Lost and Found," she muttered, hands trembling. But the logic of retrieving an item lost in the subway was bleak. After all, diaries didn't wear identifying tags like suitcases. Even if it turned up in official channels, it could be days, if ever, before it reappeared. The intimacy of her confessions churned in her mind. She had poured so much of her internal world onto those pages. It wasn't just the raw vulnerability that terrified her. It was the potential ramifications. She had written frank assessments of her workplace, her colleagues, even references to Mark Johnson's dismissive attitude. If by some chance the diary found its way into the hands of someone unscrupulous, or worse, connected to the museum, the repercussions could be disastrous. The thought alone made her feel nauseous. Needing a moment of reprieve, she sat on a bench near the station exit. Closing her eyes, she forced herself to breathe in and out, visualizing the calm halls of the Guggenheim. She told herself that panicking now wouldn't help. With shaky resolve, she decided to head to the museum and do what she could, call the Lost and Found post notices, quietly ask around. But a dark fear settled in her chest. She might never see that diary again. Roger emerged onto a busy midtown street a short while later, diary still in hand. Beneath his polished exterior, something stirred. He recalled the quiet yearning in the lines he'd skimmed. the vulnerability that seemed so absent from his everyday business world. Settling into the back seat of a company car, waiting to rush him to his meeting, Roger stared at the worn leather cover. It felt like a portal into someone's unguarded thoughts, a window he hadn't realized he was seeking. In that silent moment, he resolved to learn more about this diary's owner, even if doing so meant stepping outside the meticulously controlled routine that had defined his life for so long. Pamela arrived at the Guggenheim frazzled, her usual composure shaken by the knowledge that her most private reflections were missing. After calling the MTA's Lost and Found department, she learned that nothing matching her description had been turned in yet. The clerk advised her to check back periodically, but his tone was far from reassuring. Anxiety tightened her chest. She pictured unknown strangers leafing through the pages, dissecting her quiet revelations or ridiculing her attempts at poetic reflection. Despite this inner turmoil, the museum demanded her attention. The Digital Horizons project was gathering momentum, and Dr. Peterson had requested her input on potential artists that morning. She forced herself to carry on, though she felt like a hollow shell navigating the corridors. Meanwhile, in his sleek penthouse overlooking Central Park, Roger Whitman sat with the diary open on his glass coffee table. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline, a panorama he usually found energizing. Yet today, his mind was absorbed by the delicate handwriting in the small leather notebook. He kept telling himself he should close it, maybe even drop it off at an MTA station. But each time he turned a page, he discovered another glimpse into a life that resonated with unspoken questions in his own heart. He read lines about art installations, lamentations about corporate gatekeepers who undervalued creativity, and raw admissions of loneliness. One passage mentioned the quiet terror of going unseen in a city of millions. Roger paused, struck by the notion. He was a high-profile CEO with endless obligations, yet more often than not, he felt numb to authentic connections. The writer's words spoke to his own isolation, albeit from a completely different vantage point. Back at the museum, Mark Johnson cornered Pamela in the hallway outside her office. "Heard you're making progress on the digital exhibit," he said, a note of skepticism in his voice. "Dr. Peterson seems thrilled." "We're in the early stages, but yes, things are coming together," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. Every nerve in her body buzzed with the intrusive thought of the lost diary. She wondered if Mark would sense her vulnerability. He gave her a cursory once-over. "Just make sure you don't propose anything too eccentric. We wouldn't want to alienate our more traditional patrons. Keep it practical." With that, he strode off, leaving Pamela to fight a rising wave of frustration. Ordinarily, she might have jotted her annoyance down in the diary, but now she had nowhere to vent her immediate thoughts. Without her usual written refuge, she found herself more restless. During lunch, she pressed her phone to her ear, speaking with Olivia, who listened sympathetically. "You know me," Pamela said in a hushed tone, standing in a quiet corner near the museum's staff lounge. "That diary is everything, my innermost secrets, critiques, ideas." Olivia's voice crackled over the line. "I'm so sorry, Pam. I can't imagine how exposed you must feel. But maybe think of it this way. Losing that diary might force you to step out of your comfort zone. You won't have the pages to hide behind." Pamela sighed. "Easy for you to say. That notebook was my safety net." "Sure," Olivia acknowledged, "but maybe the universe is nudging you to find confidence in yourself, not just in your writings." Pamela tucked a stray strand of hazelnut-brown hair behind her ear, feeling unconvinced. Yet Olivia's optimism soothed her, if only slightly. She ended the call, realizing she had to focus on preparing a revised proposal for Digital Horizons. Dr. Peterson wanted it by the end of the day. Despite her personal crisis, professional obligations loomed, immovable as the museum's iconic structure. In the penthouse, Roger found himself reading more than he intended. He made it through an entry where the author, whose name, he noticed, was only signed as initials once or twice, a neat P.C. in the margin, described how she wandered Central Park on weekends, seeking pockets of solitude amid the bustle. Roger could almost see her there, a thoughtful figure on a park bench, daydreaming about immersive installations that could captivate even the busiest New Yorker. He felt a tug of empathy. The city's pulse often drowned out gentler spirits, and it appeared P.C. was grappling with that reality in a way he understood all too well. Yet the more he read, the heavier his conscience grew. He wasn't just skimming for a phone number or an email address. He was immersing himself in her confidences. Part of him argued he should close the diary immediately, but another part, the part that felt starved for authenticity, hungered for these glimpses into a mind unafraid to wrestle with vulnerability. In his world of polished boardrooms and carefully crafted public images, someone who dared to be so raw on the page was magnetic. That afternoon, as Pamela tried to concentrate on presentations and Mark's incessant feedback, Roger stood by the tall windows of his penthouse, diary in hand, debating his next step. The city stretched out below him, windows glinting with 1,000 stories. He was just beginning to grasp that the diary's author was more than a random stranger. She represented a truth and longing that had been missing from his life for years. And yet, returning the diary without delving deeper felt like relinquishing a rare chance to truly connect with another human being, one who spoke the very language of sincerity he'd spent so long craving. Pamela's Saturday began at dawn, when she found herself unable to sleep, haunted by the thought of her diary in unknown hands. She left her apartment on the Upper East Side and walked several blocks to where the morning air carried an early chill. Slowly, she tacked a few handmade flyers onto nearby telephone poles and notice boards: lost diary, brown leather cover, deep personal value. Please call or email if found. She included only her phone number and a new email address she'd created specifically for this search, preferring not to give away her full identity. It was a meager hope, but it was all she had. Her mind buzzed with what-ifs. What if someone read the pages and recognized her references to colleagues? What if Mark Johnson or another co-worker somehow came across it? And the most unsettling what-if, that a complete stranger might see the most vulnerable corners of her soul. Yet, after speaking with Olivia again, Pamela decided she had to try. Doing nothing wasn't an option. By mid-morning, she was at the Guggenheim, attempting to bury herself in a revised outline for Digital Horizons. Claire, a young assistant in the curatorial department, noticed Pamela's anxious energy and approached with a friendly smile. "I heard you're leading some of the coolest ideas for the digital exhibit. Need any help?" She held a stack of brochures and press releases. Pamela managed a grateful nod. "Actually, yes. I'd love another set of eyes on these potential artist lists. We need innovators who aren't afraid to push boundaries." Claire's genuine enthusiasm reminded Pamela that she wasn't entirely alone in her professional journey. While Mark's opinions seemed locked in tradition, there were others, like Claire, who championed forward-thinking art. It gave her a small boost of confidence, though the hollow sensation of losing her diary still loomed. Meanwhile, across town in his corporate suite, Roger finished a conference call early. Yet his mind wasn't on the strategic partnership he'd just negotiated. Instead, he was preoccupied with the silent presence of the diary, now stored carefully in a desk drawer. He hadn't dared read more that morning, out of guilt and an odd sense of protectiveness. It dawned on him that P.C., The woman behind those vulnerable pages could be searching desperately for what she'd lost. Perhaps placing it in a random Dropbox wasn't right. Perhaps he owed it to her to find a direct way to return it. And yet, the desire to know her lingered, twisting his moral compass. He pressed a button on his phone, calling Ben, his 28-year-old personal assistant. "Ben, any updates on meeting schedules this week?" he asked, feigning normalcy. Ben rattled off the usual list of corporate obligations. "Okay," Roger replied. "Also, I need some personal research done. I'd like you to monitor any local listings for a lost brown leather diary or references to it on social media or community boards. It's important." Ben hesitated. "Certainly, Mr. Whitman." "May I ask what this is about?" Roger's voice was measured. "Just let me know if you find anything, and keep this request between us." Back at the Guggenheim, Pamela took an hour break to meet Olivia for lunch at a small bistro. Sitting at a corner table, she recounted how the museum had been her only distraction from the gnawing fear that someone might be devouring her personal reflections. Olivia sipped iced tea, nodding. "I still think there's a chance whoever found it might do the right thing," she said gently. "You posted flyers, you're checking lost and found, it's all you can do." "I feel silly being so distraught over a notebook," Pamela confessed. "But everything that truly matters to me is in there. My criticisms of the art world, confessions about my loneliness. If the wrong person reads it, it's game over for me at the museum. Or at least, it'll feel that way." Olivia reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "You're not silly. You just happen to value honesty, and you poured that honesty into those pages. We'll figure this out." The conversation lifted Pamela's spirits enough that she returned to the Guggenheim, determined to finalize her updated proposal for Dr. Peterson. She closed herself off in a quiet office nook, scanning the digital slides that highlighted emerging talents in video mapping, immersive VR art, and interactive holograms. Each piece embodied a risk-taking quality she admired. Artists who put their hearts on display for public scrutiny. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Her diary was a piece of her heart she had never intended anyone else to see. Late afternoon light slanted through the Guggenheim skylight, and as Pamela powered down her computer, she felt a tiny glimmer of hope stir inside. Despite the anxiety of losing her diary, she couldn't ignore the possibility that it might eventually find its way back to her, or that in losing it, she might discover a part of herself she had kept locked away. Her phone buzzed. It was Olivia texting. "Any luck?" Pamela typed back, "Not yet, but still trying." And despite the dread lingering in her chest, she realized she was in fact still trying, both in her career and in reclaiming her words. Maybe that fragile hope meant she was closer than she thought to stepping out from behind the safety of her pages, ready or not. Roger Whitman sat in his corner office at Whitman Tech, tapping a pen restlessly against the sleek glass surface of his desk. The early morning sun filtered through expansive windows, illuminating rows of high-end computers and minimalist decor that reflected his company's cutting-edge focus. Despite the air of modern sophistication, Roger's mind lingered on a worn, brown leather diary tucked away in his briefcase. He'd carried it in with him, intending to scan once more for any clues about the mysterious PC. He glanced at his watch. Meetings with department heads loomed, yet his thoughts kept drifting to the candid lines he'd read the night before. The diary's passages were personal, yes, but they also offered commentary on the broader art world, insightful critiques, and fervent hopes about immersive exhibitions. There was something disarming about the way the author blended everyday vulnerabilities with a fierce passion for creativity. It tugged at him more powerfully than any corporate agenda. His assistant, Ben, knocked gently on the door before entering. "Good morning, Mr. Whitman," he said, voice crisp. "We have the product development briefing in 15 minutes, followed by a lunch meeting with the PR team. Also," he added, lowering his voice discreetly, "I've been searching local notices and online boards as you requested. So far, I haven't found any direct posts about a missing brown diary, but I'll keep looking." Roger nodded, trying to appear only mildly interested. "Keep me updated, please." "Yes, sir." Ben offered a polite smile and left, closing the door behind him. Alone again, Roger flipped open his laptop to check the social media platforms and community forums he sometimes monitored. He typed generic terms: lost diary, brown notebook, found in subway. Nothing new emerged, just a few random posts that didn't match the item in his possession. A persistent voice in his head argued that he should turn the diary in, or at least store it somewhere public. But every time he considered it, he hesitated. Because in those pages, he found a kind of unvarnished authenticity that seemed rarer than diamonds in his carefully manicured circles. He thought back to how stifled he often felt at industry galas or at high-stakes conferences, where every conversation was a dance of posturing. Reading the diary had become a strange refuge. Someone out there, a woman he'd never met, was brave enough to put her raw thoughts into words. And though he felt slightly guilty about continuing to read, he couldn't deny that each new passage drew him deeper into the mind of this unseen stranger. Later that morning, as he headed to the product development briefing, he decided on a compromise. He would go through the diary more carefully, trying to pinpoint a direct way to contact the author. If he found any personal info, an email, a phone number, or an address, he'd reach out and return it. Then he'd close this peculiar chapter. Still, he knew better than to assume it would be that simple. He already felt a subtle, disconcerting connection he couldn't explain, and returning the diary might not be the end of that feeling. Meanwhile, at the Guggenheim, Pamela was wrestling with a new set of challenges. She sat at a cluttered desk in the curatorial office, studying the museum's calendar. The official launch date for Digital Horizons had been pushed up. Dr. Peterson had encouraged her to finalize her selections for the exhibit, but as she reviewed lists of digital artists and project proposals, she found her thoughts drifting. She missed the comforting routine of writing in her diary. Without it, she felt as though she were missing a limb, stumbling through each day without her private method of processing doubts or celebrating small victories. To add to the strain, Mark Johnson's presence hovered at the edge of every conversation. He always seemed to be in the next office or corridor, politely inquiring about her progress with an undertone of skepticism. During a brief hallway encounter, he gave her what passed for a friendly nod. "Pamela, I heard you're finalizing the main installations for Digital Horizons. Let's ensure we keep the budget within reason. The museum board members want something fresh, but not outlandish." She tightened her grip on her notepad. "Of course, Mark. I'm mindful of both budget and impact. Dr. Peterson supports these choices." "I'm sure he does," Mark replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But we can't rely on his goodwill alone. Some of our traditional patrons might be hesitant to embrace something so technologically avant-garde." "Well," she said evenly, "part of the Guggenheim's mission is to champion innovation. I believe we can deliver that without alienating our core supporters." He gave a small shrug. "We'll see how it plays out. Keep me informed." With that, he strode away. Sighing, Pamela returned to her office. She sent a quick text to Olivia. Still no word on the diary. Searching daily. Anxiety is unreal. Even as she tapped out the message, she mentally echoed the sentiment. The diary was gone, its contents exposed to who knew whom. Sometimes she caught herself looking around the museum, paranoid that someone else in the building might have it. But deep down, she felt it was unlikely. She would have heard rumors by now. Mark would have wasted no time using anything scandalous against her. So, if not the museum, Then where was it? She refocused on her computer screen, poring over submissions from cutting-edge artists experimenting with augmented reality and motion sensor installations. Reading through their proposals, she felt a spark of excitement. This was the part of her work she adored, discovering new ways to bridge art and human experience. She let that enthusiasm buoy her spirits, reminding herself that despite the diary's disappearance, she still had her talents and convictions. In another part of Manhattan, Roger finished his product briefing and returned to his office. Heart pounding with a mix of curiosity and guilt, he opened the diary, flipping to a random page near the middle. He read about the author's frustration over a colleague who belittled her ambitions, though she never named him. She wrote, "I wish I were braver at work, that I could speak as freely as I write here. It's ironic. My ideas belong in broad daylight, but I hide them in the dark." Those words punched Roger in the gut. He recognized his own corporate environment, a place where appearances mattered more than authenticity. He traced the edges of the page with his fingertips, feeling an unspoken kinship with this unknown person. Here was a soul who bared her fears in private while yearning for acknowledgement in public. And he, successful yet lonely at the top, was drawn to her honesty like a moth to a flame. He told himself it was time to take the next step. He would look for contact information in the pages as meticulously as possible. If he found it, he would reach out and do the right thing. Yet even as he formed this resolution, a part of him wondered, in returning the diary, would he lose the only thing that felt genuinely real in his life right now? Roger found himself standing on a bustling sidewalk in Chelsea the following afternoon, scanning the exterior of a modest art gallery called Fuller Visions. A swirl of autumn leaves blew around his polished leather shoes. It was not the kind of place he typically visited. He was more accustomed to exclusive galleries where he'd show up as a VIP patron. But P. Zikia had detailed this very gallery in her diary, praising its dedication to emerging artists who blended traditional mediums with digital techniques. Though it felt somewhat surreal, Roger had convinced himself this was the most direct way to find her. The diary's references to Chelsea's art scene were frequent, a small note about a standout sculpture exhibit, a reference to an experimental video installation that Pamela, or rather, the unknown PC, had admired deeply. For Roger, stepping into this gallery felt like entering another slice of her life. He pushed open the glass door and was greeted by a subdued interior, white walls, soft lighting, and a curated selection of art. Each piece seemed carefully placed, inviting a visitor to linger. Two women stood at the desk, engaged in hushed conversation. A faint hum of low jazz music played overhead. Unsure of how to proceed, Roger began wandering from piece to piece, feigning casual interest, but really focusing on the details P.C. had described in her notes. She had written about a painting that layered city landscapes and digital code, capturing the dissonance between old New York architecture and the ever-encroaching digital realm. He finally spotted it on the far wall, a canvas with streaks of neon green slicing through a charcoal skyline. Approaching it, he recognized from her words that she found beauty in the tension it evoked, where technology meets the bones of the city. He stood there, strangely moved, not just by the piece itself, but by the fact that he was seeing it through her eyes. Part of him felt foolish for following a stranger's diary entries like clues in a scavenger hunt. Another part felt increasingly certain he needed to meet this woman, to understand what had prompted her to write so candidly. A gentle cough sounded from behind him. He turned to see a woman in her 50s, silver hair pulled into a sleek bun. "Beautiful piece, isn't it?" she asked. "We've had quite a response since we displayed it." Roger nodded. "Yes, it's compelling. I read a review of it somewhere. Thought I'd come see for myself." He hesitated before deciding to take a small risk. "Do you happen to keep a guest book or record of visitors who comment on the pieces?" Her smile was polite but guarded. "We do have a guest book at the front desk. Would you like to sign it?" "Actually, I'm looking for a specific comment someone might have left a while back." "It's a bit of a long shot," he admitted, feeling a tinge of embarrassment. "An acquaintance of mine came here. She might have signed her name with initials, P.C. The woman studied him for a moment. "We can take a look," she offered, tilting her head in curiosity. "Though not everyone signs. Some leave only a date or a quick note." They walked to the front desk. She pulled out a thick guest book with a floral cover. Roger's heart drummed in his ears as he flipped through pages of looping signatures and short remarks. "Wonderful exhibit. I love the bold colors. Fantastic fusion of art and tech." Page after page, he scanned for anything that resembled P.C. He saw only the occasional initials, none matching the style of the diary's scribbled moniker. "I'm not seeing it," Roger said eventually, closing the book. "Thanks for letting me check." "Of course," she replied. "But you might try the printed page bookstore around the corner. They often host small art talks, and many of our visitors end up there. Your friend might be on their mailing list." Roger thanked her, left the gallery, and stepped into the busy Chelsea sidewalk. He gazed at the store across the street, the printed page. The diary described it as a cozy bookstore that housed not only rare volumes, but also an espresso bar where the author liked to sit and observe the eclectic mix of patrons. Without pausing to reconsider, he navigated across the crosswalk and entered the shop. Inside, the air smelled of old books and fresh coffee. Tall wooden shelves groaned with titles arranged by genre. At the back, small tables formed a makeshift cafe, a chalkboard listing daily specials. The scene was both lively and intimate, exactly as P.C. had written, "A rare haven in the city, strangers immersed in pages rather than screens." Trying not to feel ridiculous, Roger approached the front counter where a young clerk, wearing rectangular glasses, looked up. "Hi, can I help you find something?" "Maybe?" Roger paused. "I'm looking for someone who might frequent this place. She's passionate about art, especially digital fusion. She might have attended events here." He realized he had virtually no description to offer, aside from the personality gleaned from the diary. The clerk shrugged apologetically. "We have quite a few regulars. Do you know her name?" Roger forced a small smile. "I only have her initials, P.C. That might not be enough, I guess." "Sorry," the clerk said. "We do host monthly art gatherings. Our next one's in a few weeks. People sign up for the newsletter if they attend more than once. We can check if there's a P.C. on the email list." Roger's eyes sparked with hope. "Yes, please." While the clerk tapped on the computer, Roger glanced around. Book spines offered glimpses into worlds of poetry, biography, technology, history. The synergy felt oddly intimate, as though he were stepping further into P.C.'s domain. After a few minutes, the clerk shook his head. "No match on that. Could be she never gave her initials or used a different email." Roger nodded, trying not to show his disappointment. "Thank you for checking." He bought a small cappuccino from the cafe section as a gesture of support, then found himself a seat at one of the cozy wooden tables. Outside, the afternoon sun drifted lower, sending angled rays through the windows. He'd found no leads, no clues. Yet being in these places she'd described, a modest gallery in Chelsea, this bookstore cafe, felt strangely affirming. The diary's author had left behind an invisible trail of heartfelt reflections all over the city. And in tracing it, Roger couldn't help feeling he was stepping into her footsteps, seeing Manhattan as she saw it, a mix of hustle, artistic brilliance, and the quiet corners that fed her soul. He knew he might be chasing a phantom, But as he sipped his cappuccino and surveyed the shelves of worn paperbacks, he also knew he wasn't quite ready to give up. Returning the diary anonymously would be the logical solution. Yet that lingering sense of destiny, of meeting a kindred spirit, urged him onward, however improbable. With a final sip, he resolved to keep searching. After all, for once in his carefully managed life, logic wasn't the force driving him. Something deeper, more personal, had taken the wheel. Pamela sat in a dimly lit conference room at the Guggenheim, eyes scanning a projected slideshow of futuristic digital installations. She was presenting her refined proposal for Digital Horizons to Dr. Peterson and two junior curatorial staff members, Claire and Joshua. The entire space glowed with the light of vibrant images, interactive VR pieces, conceptual drone art, and immersive data-driven sculptures. This piece, Pamela explained, pointing to a slideshow photo, melds local demographic information with real-time visitor input to create a constantly shifting visual mosaic. It's titled City Echoes, and the artist, Elena Laramie, has been recognized for bridging personal narratives with public data. Visitors can walk through sensors that capture movement, generating fractal shapes projected onto a curved screen. It's an ever-evolving reflection of the community itself. Dr. Peterson nodded in approval, his 60-year-old face warmed by enthusiasm. Excellent choice, Pamela. This is precisely the kind of innovation we want to highlight. Joshua, seated near the end of the table, chimed in. I've seen Elena's work in smaller galleries. It's mesmerizing how she turns raw data into something visually poetic. Claire tapped a pen against her notes. From a curatorial standpoint, how do we prepare the space? That installation requires a fairly large footprint for all the equipment and projectors. Pamela clicked to the next slide, revealing a floor plan. We'll need to section off an entire gallery so viewers can navigate multiple interactive zones. The Guggenheim's open layout might require strategic partitions, but the payoff will be an immersive experience that aligns with our modern mission. Dr. Peterson glanced at his watch, then back at Pamela with a smile. I'm impressed. You've anticipated potential hurdles. Let's schedule a meeting with the installation crew and finalize the budget. You'll have my full support. The relief that washed over Pamela was palpable. She gave a small smile in return. Knowing she had Dr. Peterson's endorsement meant the world. It was a testament to her competence and vision. It also provided a buffer against Mark Johnson's wary gaze. She began packing up her laptop when Claire gave her a friendly nudge. Hey, a few of us are grabbing coffee in the staff lounge before the next round of planning. Want to join? Pamela hesitated. Typically, she might retreat to solitude, especially in these tumultuous days without her diary. But she recalled Olivia's constant refrain, take more chances. So she nodded. Sure, let's do it. They made their way to the lounge, a modest room with a few tables, a coffee machine, and art posters pinned to the walls. Mark Johnson stood there, sipping from a ceramic mug. He raised an eyebrow when the group entered. I hear the exhibit's shaping up, he said. Dr. Peterson is quite enthusiastic. Pamela caught the faint edge to his tone. He is, she answered carefully, refusing to be rattled. There's a lot of potential in these digital pieces, Mark gave a half smile. Well, let's hope the board sees it that way. Some patrons aren't fans of overtly experimental installations. Joshua cleared his throat. With respect, the museum has always embraced contemporary innovation. Even if some patrons take time to adjust, the payoff could be significant. Mark shrugged. We'll see. I'm not against innovation, but finances and traditions still matter. Just be prepared for pushback if some donors find these installations too radical. He downed the rest of his coffee and strode out, leaving a slight hush in his wake. Claire rolled her eyes and murmured to Pamela, "He's got a knack for draining the energy out of a room." Pamela half laughed, but felt the familiar coil of tension in her stomach. Mark's skepticism lurked in every corner. Even with Dr. Peterson's support, she couldn't ignore the risk of potential clashes. When the brief coffee break ended, Pamela returned to her office and discovered a voicemail on her phone. "Ms. Clark, this is MTA Lost Property. Nothing new regarding your missing item. Call us next week." She sighed, pressing her forehead against her desk for a moment. The daily check-ins yielded nothing, intensifying the fear that the diary might never come back. Pushing that concern aside, she refocused on refining budget outlines for Digital Horizons. She worked late into the evening, ensuring each artist's technical requirements were precisely accounted for. By the time she finally left the museum, the city was bathed in glowing streetlights, the sidewalk thronged with late-night strollers and food truck lines. Across Manhattan, Roger sat in his penthouse, finishing a solitary dinner. He was telling himself that scouring Chelsea had been enough for now. He'd search no further. And yet, as he rinsed his plate, his eyes drifted to where the diary lay on the kitchen counter. He hadn't read more than a few pages since his recent gallery excursion. Some invisible boundary in him felt uneasy about delving deeper. Instead, he'd skimmed the first and last pages for any name, phone number, or address. Still nothing. He tried not to think about how his heart fluttered each time he caught sight of that scuffed leather cover. It felt a bit like having a secret houseguest who whispered truths at odd hours of the night, in a city where everyone seemed to shout for attention. This unknown woman's quiet confessions resonated more than any loud ambition he'd encountered. After tidying up, he strolled over to the broad windows and gazed out at the shimmering skyline. He recalled the most recent passage he'd glimpsed. "Art is my safe place in a city that doesn't slow down. Sometimes I wonder if my longing for recognition is just a mirror of the city's frenzy, or if it's a genuine need to connect." He felt her words reverberate in his own chest. Maybe they both sought something real in a world of facades. Setting his jaw, he decided that first thing tomorrow, he'd intensify his efforts. He would check local listings, post anonymously in some of the city's art-related forums about a found diary. Perhaps by inviting the rightful owner to identify its contents, he could do the right thing while respecting her privacy. The idea gave him the faintest flicker of hope. If she responded, he'd return it. And maybe, just maybe, he'd get to meet the woman behind those poignant, searching lines. Pamela arrived at the Guggenheim with an unusual sense of anticipation. Her proposal for Digital Horizons had been passed around internally, and several staff members from different departments expressed enthusiasm for her ideas. She found it uplifting that, despite the absence of her diary, she was starting to voice her thoughts more confidently in meetings. It was as if losing her written outlet forced her to communicate aloud. Heading to her office, she noticed Claire and Joshua huddled together, chatting excitedly. When they spotted her, Joshua waved her over. "Pamela, we've been talking about ways to enhance the interactive aspect of your curated pieces. Remember how we discussed layering motion sensors with projection mapping? We got in touch with a local tech startup that's interested in collaborating on the hardware side." Pamela felt a jolt of optimism. "That's fantastic. The more synergy we create, the stronger the exhibit becomes. Let's set up a meeting with them." Claire nodded eagerly. "We can handle the initial outreach, see if they're truly a good fit, but it's promising. Someone on their team recognized the potential in immersive museum exhibits." The collaboration, unfolding before her eyes, warmed Pamela's heart. She'd always believed in cross-pollination between art and technology, but seeing co-workers share her passion made her realize she wasn't alone. She let out a small laugh. "I'd be grateful for your help. This exhibit is bigger than me. It's about everyone bringing fresh energy to the Guggenheim. Joshua leaned in. We'll keep you updated. By the way, congrats on the traction your ideas are getting. People are talking about it in the cafeteria, saying it could be the museum's boldest move in years. She felt a rush of pride. Even though Mark remained a looming figure of doubt, Dr. Peterson's support and her younger colleagues' enthusiasm were propelling her forward. Before her diary vanished, she wouldn't have been this open to group input. It was a bittersweet realization. Losing her private pages might be nudging her into real-world dialogue. Meanwhile, Roger was sitting in his high-rise office, drafting a succinct post for a popular art forum. He typed, "Found, leather-bound diary with extensive notes on art, museums, and personal reflections, found on the 6th train. If you believe this is yours, please reply with details about the diary's contents so it can be returned to you." He used an anonymous username to avoid revealing his identity. He stared at the words for a moment, his finger hovering over the post button. Once he clicked, there would be no going back. He'd be actively inviting the diary's owner to come forward. After a deep breath, he posted it. Then he found a couple more forums that centered on New York art culture and repeated the process. Leaning back in his chair, he felt a slight shiver of vulnerability. Perhaps he was more invested in the outcome than he cared to admit. But it was the right step. If she saw it, she would respond. If not, well, at least he'd tried. He spent the next few hours monitoring replies, but all he received were spam messages or random inquiries from curious strangers. None of them supplied the correct details. Exhaling, he reminded himself that not everyone checked art forums religiously. Patience was key. At the Guggenheim, Dr. Peterson summoned Pamela to his office. She found him reviewing a thick binder of budgets. "Come in," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Pamela, I have encouraging news. The board wants a preliminary layout presentation next week for Digital Horizons. Mark will be there, of course, along with a few key donors. This is your chance to show them how immersive and transformative these installations can be." Pamela's stomach twisted. "Wow, that's soon." Dr. Peterson smiled gently. "I know it's tight, but you have strong allies among the junior staff, and I'm confident you'll manage. Your vision is exactly what the Guggenheim needs right now, a push into fresh territory." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, heart pounding. "Thank you for believing in me. I'll do everything I can to prepare a compelling presentation." After she left his office, she teamed up with Claire, Joshua, and a handful of tech-savvy interns, mapping out every detail for the pitch. They designed mock-ups of the gallery's interior, illustrating how each digital installation would be positioned. Claire suggested adding a live demonstration of one smaller interactive piece, so the donors could experience the concept firsthand. Joshua collected video clips of successful digital exhibits from other museums to underscore how modernization could attract younger patrons and press coverage. For once, as Pamela directed these efforts, she felt a sense of communal strength. Instead of confiding solely in a journal, she was sharing her ideas openly, watching as they took on a life of their own through collaboration. A quiet realization dawned on her. Yes, she still desperately wanted her diary back, but being forced to articulate her thoughts out loud had shifted something fundamental in her approach. In a break from the flurry of planning, she checked her phone. No messages from the MTA, no responses to the flyers she'd posted. Disappointment pricked her, but she pushed it aside, reminding herself she had a presentation to deliver soon. She couldn't let fear and frustration paralyze her. That night, after a long day's work, Pamela joined Olivia for a quick dinner at a small Japanese restaurant. Over steaming bowls of ramen, she recounted how her younger colleagues had stepped up in ways she never expected. Olivia's eyes sparkled. "This is good, Pam. You're letting people in. You're rallying them around your vision. That's leadership." Pamela fiddled with her chopsticks, thinking how ironic it was that the diary she once thought essential to her functioning had vanished just as she was being called to shine in public. I guess I didn't realize how supportive others could be. Don't forget to give yourself credit, Olivia said firmly. You earned their respect by being genuine, and maybe that's part of the silver lining, learning you can trust people. Pamela nodded slowly. They clinked their water glasses in a quiet toast. As she finished her noodles, she felt a flicker of hope that maybe, if she kept forging ahead, the losses she'd suffered might pave the way for connections she'd never imagined. And across the city, though she had no way of knowing it yet, a certain CEO was doing everything in his power to bring her diary home. The following Monday morning, Pamela woke with a sense of anticipation. She'd spent the entire weekend refining the final slides and mock-ups for the crucial board presentation on digital horizons. Claire, Joshua, and 2 interns had worked tirelessly alongside her, ensuring every technical and aesthetic angle was addressed. Now, standing in her bedroom with the city's early light filtering through her curtains, Pamela pulled on a crisp blouse and blazer, mustering the confidence she hoped would carry her through the day. Her phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Knock 'em dead today. You got this." She smiled at the screen, grateful for her friend's unwavering support. Then she carefully gathered her laptop and notes, stepping out into the bustling street. Even the crisp autumn air felt invigorating, as though cheering her on. At the Guggenheim, the boardroom hummed with activity. Several trustees were already seated around a glossy wooden table, murmuring greetings to one another. Mark Johnson stood by a projector, fiddling with cables. Dr. Peterson, stationed near the head of the table, greeted Pamela with a warm nod. "Ready, Mrs. Clark?" he asked, using her last name to signal respect in front of the board members. She swallowed, offering a steady smile. "Absolutely." Soon, everyone settled in. Mark gestured for Pamela to begin, his expression neutral but not overtly hostile. She took a deep breath, mentally reviewing her opening lines. The lights dimmed, and on the projection screen appeared the title, Slide Digital Horizons, the next phase of curatorial innovation at the Guggenheim. Her voice wavered slightly at first, but as she guided the group through the conceptual framework, her confidence grew. She showed them how the museum's signature architecture could be leveraged for immersive installations, described the cutting-edge artists and the dynamic experiences they were creating, and even included short video snippets of prototypes. Claire and Joshua stood at the back, ready to handle technical questions, while Dr. Peterson occasionally chimed in with words of support. As the presentation concluded, Pamela revealed the proposed timeline and budget breakdown. She addressed potential donor concerns, emphasizing how interactive exhibits were drawing record crowds at other leading institutions around the world. When the lights came back on, the trustees exchanged thoughtful glances. One raised a hand and asked about balancing the Guggenheim's modern image with its historical reputation. Pamela replied calmly, "We're not abandoning tradition, we're expanding it. The Guggenheim has always pushed boundaries, from Wright's radical architecture to contemporary exhibits that once seemed risky. Digital Horizons is the next chapter in that legacy." A second trustee asked about the possibility of negative reactions from more conservative supporters. Pamela acknowledged the risk, but highlighted that many donors actually welcome forward-thinking projects to keep the museum relevant in a rapidly changing cultural landscape. Throughout it all, she maintained composure, recalling how she used to jot down these arguments in her diary. Now she was speaking them aloud. Finally, the trustees conferred quietly. The eldest among them, a tall man with neatly combed silver hair, cleared his throat. "Miss Clark, this is an ambitious proposal. Innovation can be expensive and controversial, yet your plan addresses these concerns quite thoroughly. I'm inclined to support it. He glanced around at the others. We'll finalize details, but Dr. Peterson, I think your junior curator has proven herself capable. Kudos to you all. A wave of relief washed over Pamela. Applause broke out, and Dr. Peterson gave her a proud smile. Mark Johnson, while not clapping as enthusiastically, offered a polite nod. Pamela felt a rush of exhilaration. Months of doubt, overshadowed by the diary's disappearance, had crystallized into a moment of triumph. After the trustees left, Mark approached her. "Well done," he said, arms folded but voice warmer than usual. "I may have had my reservations, but that was a solid pitch. The board seemed impressed." She nodded. "Thank you, Mark. I appreciate your acknowledgement." He half smiled. "We'll be working together closely to pull this off. Let's keep lines of communication open." When he walked away, she noticed her shoulders relax. Even Mark was extending a branch of cooperation. She turned to Dr. Peterson, who patted her on the back. "You're coming into your own. Pamela, keep it up." Claire and Joshua, who had joined them, nearly bounced with excitement. "That was incredible! I've never seen some of those trustees look so enthusiastic," Claire exclaimed. Joshua added, "You were on fire." Pamela felt warmth spread through her chest. She thanked them both, giving credit where credit was due. "I couldn't have done this without your help and passion." Stepping out of the boardroom, her phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. "How'd it go?" Pamela typed back a concise reply. "We nailed it." Then she paused, allowing a moment of reflection. The day was shaping up to be a milestone. She'd spoken with authority, garnered the board's backing, and even navigated Mark's comments gracefully. In the swirl of her thoughts, the old longing for her diary flickered. She pictured herself scribbling down every detail of today's success, but maybe it was fitting that she couldn't. Perhaps life was pushing her to experience the victory in real time, not just through silent reflections. And though she still yearned to regain that precious notebook, she was starting to believe that the best chapters of her story might unfold not on the written page, but in her bold steps forward, right here in the luminous reality of the Guggenheim. Pamela Clark stepped out of the taxi onto Madison Avenue, the crisp October air stirring the ends of her hazelnut-brown hair. Her destination, the Morgan Library and Museum, rose before her in stately grandeur, an architectural gem that held centuries of literary and historical artifacts. She clutched her slim purse, which contained a small notepad, feeling a surge of excitement. This was no ordinary evening. The Morgan was hosting a highly anticipated lecture on preserving cultural history, specifically focusing on how digital archives could safeguard art and historical documents. For Pamela, who lived and breathed the fusion of art with evolving technology, it felt like destiny calling. She walked up the marble steps, pausing in the ornate lobby. A few clusters of people chatted softly, their voices echoing under the high, coffered ceiling. She recognized a couple of museum acquaintances, politely nodding hello as she approached the registration table. For the lecture, she'd decided to wear a fitted grey dress with a subtle floral print. But the most meaningful accessory was the vintage dragonfly brooch pinned to her lapel, a piece she'd once inherited from her grandmother. Though it was small, she adored its delicate filigree wings and the tiny emerald in its center. In a recent entry, one of the last she wrote before losing her diary, she had mused about wearing it whenever she needed courage. She showed her ticket to a staff member, who handed her a program schedule. Scanning the itinerary, she noted the keynote speaker, a renowned archivist, discussing digital preservation methods. While it was an academic topic, Pamela found it thrilling. Her own curation work at the Guggenheim often involved blending the old and new, and she was eager to glean insights she might apply to digital horizons. Inside the auditorium, she selected a seat halfway up the rows, hoping for a decent view of the stage. She noticed a few young museum professionals, presumably from other institutions, flipping through brochures. A gentle hum of anticipation filled the room. Taking out her notepad, she jotted a quick reflection. Strange to attend a talk without the comfort of my diary, but maybe I'm learning to think in the moment, she sighed, missing the tactile reassurance of that worn leather cover. Meanwhile, Roger Whitman lingered in the corridor just outside the auditorium. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, he felt an unfamiliar ripple of nerves. He wasn't typically one to attend academic lectures uninvited, especially not on a topic outside his business realm, but a line in the diary had nudged him here. He remembered reading about the Morgan Library talk next month, penned by the unknown PC. She'd written that she was looking forward to it, describing her fascination with how historical artifacts were preserved in the digital age. He scanned the flow of attendees trickling into the auditorium. This was a risk. There was no guarantee she'd be here, and even less certainty that he'd recognize her without an identifying detail. Yet he couldn't shake the compulsion to try. He'd taken the next step by posting about the diary online, with no fruitful leads. Maybe fate would intervene tonight, or maybe he was simply chasing a ghost. Either way, he hadn't felt this alive in a long time. He took a seat near the side, scanning the room. A hush settled as the lights dimmed and the stage lit up. The archivist, a silver-haired scholar with a measured speaking voice, began explaining how advanced scanning technologies and digital backups could protect ancient manuscripts. Roger tried to concentrate, but he kept glancing around the audience. Was she here? Would she be wearing something distinctive? He didn't even know what she looked like. After the formal talk ended, the speaker invited questions. A handful of attendees approached the microphone in the aisle. Roger rose, drifting toward the back to position himself by the exit, hoping to spot someone with the intangible spark he'd gleaned from the diary's pages. His heart pounded when he saw a petite woman step into the aisle, wearing a grey dress and a small, glittering brooch. She had hazelnut-brown hair, pinned up in a loose twist, and a thoughtful expression. He couldn't see her face clearly, but something about the way she held herself, the quiet poise, the way she clutched a notepad, made his pulse quicken. He leaned forward slightly. The woman asked a question about bridging digital archiving with museum curation, and her voice trembled just a touch, as if she was earnest but shy. There was a calm intelligence behind her words. It matched the diary's tone so well that Roger felt his breath catch. Then, as she turned back to her seat, the stage lights reflected off the dragonfly pin on her lapel. He recalled reading a diary passage about a cherished grandmother's brooch shaped like a dragonfly. It has to be her. Roger's mind raced. For a moment, he stood frozen, uncertain of whether he should approach her right away or wait until the crowd dispersed. The lingering guilt over reading her private thoughts warred with the undeniable excitement of finally seeing her in person. He remained by the wall, scanning the sea of departing attendees, his gaze locked on her shape as she collected her bag. As the auditorium emptied, she slipped out through a side door leading to a hallway lined with glass cases. Roger followed, maintaining a respectful distance. He didn't want to appear like a stalker, but every fiber of his being clamored not to lose her in the crowd. In the hallway, Pamela paused to examine a display of illuminated manuscripts. The lines of medieval script danced behind protective glass. Roger edged closer, his heartbeat thunderous. This was it, the moment he'd imagined since he first opened that diary on the subway. Yet an uneasy sensation tugged at him. How could he possibly explain himself without startling her? The words from the diary replayed in his mind. We all wear masks, but sometimes I yearn for someone who sees me unguarded. He cleared his throat softly, summoning the nerve to speak. She turned slightly, meeting his gaze. For an instant, neither spoke. Her expression was polite, but somewhat guarded. Roger felt as though he was on the edge of a precipice, about to leap into unknown territory. Then he managed a small, tentative smile. "Good evening," he said, voice hushed in the museum's quiet. "That was quite a lecture, wasn't it?" Pamela nodded, hugging her notepad to her chest. "It was," she replied, her eyes flickering with curiosity. "Are you interested in preservation methods too?" His mind buzzed with 1,000 questions and confessions, but he reined them in, determined not to overwhelm her. "I am," he said, picking his words carefully. "I find it fascinating how technology intersects with art and history." She smiled politely, brushing a stray hair from her face. "Yes, exactly. It's the next frontier for museums and cultural institutions." Roger noticed how her voice grew steadier as she spoke about art. He could feel the passion emanating from her, the same deep reflection he glimpsed in her diary. But how to proceed without revealing too much, too soon? He stole a quick glance at the brooch. Could she be the same woman who wrote, "I'll wear the dragonfly pin in hopes it gives me the courage to ask questions at the Morgan talk"? Even the slightest doubt about her identity melted away. This had to be PC, and though he'd found her at last, it dawned on him that this wasn't an ending but a beginning, one fraught with secrets he had yet to confess. Late evening light bathed the corridors of the Morgan Library and Museum with a burnished glow. Visitors lingered near the glass display cases or chatted in hushed tones beneath the chandeliers. From where she stood, Pamela felt the day's excitement still pulsing in her veins. Meeting new people who shared her passion for safeguarding art was invigorating, and she'd asked her question during the Q&A, a small personal victory. Usually, such a public step would make her retreat to the pages of her diary to process it all. Instead, she was left with an odd mixture of pride and longing, the diary's absence once again a sharp reminder. She glanced at the man she'd just met, tall, with dark hair and a refined posture. He wore an expensive-looking suit, the cut suggesting wealth or high status, though he carried himself without the typical arrogance she sometimes encountered at upscale gallery events. If anything, he seemed a bit hesitant, as though carefully weighing each of his words before speaking them. He introduced himself as Roger Whitman. The name prodded a small jolt of familiarity in the back of her mind, but she couldn't place it right away. Perhaps she'd seen it in a business article or heard it in passing. "I don't usually make it to events like this," he admitted, offering a mild grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "But this one seemed unmissable," Pamela nodded. "Likewise, I'm a junior curator at the Guggenheim, so I'm always searching for ways to blend historic preservation with digital innovation." Her voice carried a note of excitement she often kept hidden among the museum staff. No one there had asked her about her personal motivations quite so directly, yet this stranger's presence brought it out. Something in Roger's gaze flickered. "The Guggenheim," he repeated softly, as if filing the information away. Then, as they walked past a series of framed letters from famous authors, he said, "I've heard about some upcoming digital exhibit, Digital Horizons, right? Is that your project?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Yes, I've been spearheading the curation. It's been a challenge, but I'm excited about the reception so far." She paused, studying his face for a clue about why he felt vaguely significant. "You seem quite knowledgeable about the art scene." Roger shifted, glancing down the hallway as though wary of being overheard. "I keep up with local museums and exhibits, though I'm more involved in the tech sector. I find the fusion between technology and creativity compelling. A mutual smile passed between them, an almost tangible energy crackling in the air. For a few moments, they strolled side by side, pausing every now and then to admire some artifact or a collection of aged manuscripts. Pamela felt an odd comfort in his presence. He radiated a calm confidence that encouraged her to speak freely. She thought to herself how rare it was to meet someone outside her immediate circle who cared about art as much as she did. At one point, Pamela reached up to adjust her dragonfly brooch. The emerald wing glinted under the corridor's warm lighting, catching Roger's eye. He inhaled, recalling an entry in the diary describing that exact piece of jewelry, a family heirloom. It's not just an accessory, it's a reminder that resilience can be passed down. He cleared his throat, heart pounding at the confirmation. Yes, it was truly her. "You mentioned your interest in digital archives," Pamela said, turning to him. Are you here for a specific reason? Maybe a project of your own?" He hesitated. There it was, the opening to tell her. Every instinct urged him to come clean. "I found your diary on the subway. I've been captivated by your words ever since." But fear of scaring her off clashed with the mounting guilt at his silence. He swallowed hard. "I suppose I'm searching for insight," he answered, voice careful. "I run a tech company, and I've been wanting to see how that intersects with the preservation of art, culture, that sort of thing." Pamela nodded, satisfied. "It's definitely an emerging field. She stopped short when she spotted a friend from the Guggenheim across the corridor. Politely excusing herself from Roger, she waved to her colleague. He politely stepped aside, allowing them a brief chat about future collaborative opportunities. But his gaze never left Pamela's figure. The moment she turned back, he felt a tug in his chest, as though each passing second threatened to carry her away. The museum announcement overhead signaled that closing time was approaching. People began drifting toward the exit, discussing after-lecture plans. Pamela rejoined him, and they slowly made their way to the grand foyer. She debated whether to invite him for coffee or simply say goodnight, her mind flipping through reasons to prolong this conversation. Something about Roger felt both comforting and mysterious. Roger, too, wrestled with a desire for more time. Yet he also sensed that rushing a connection might scare her off. He settled for a measured approach. "I realize it's late, but if you're not in a hurry, perhaps we could grab a quick coffee. I'd love to hear more about digital horizons, and maybe you could enlighten me about the future of museum curation." Pamela paused, glancing at the ornate clock mounted above the museum's arched doorway. It was nearing 9 o'clock. She usually avoided spontaneous outings with strangers, particularly ones she'd met under such fleeting circumstances. But a gentle inner voice, possibly Olivia's echo, urged her to take a risk. "Sure," she replied, tucking her notepad into her purse. "There's a cafe just around the corner. It stays open late." A smile spread across Roger's face, an involuntary reflection of relief and excitement. Together, they navigated the final corridor, stepping out onto the hushed streets. As they walked side by side, their footsteps echoing against the pavement, Pamela stole a glance at him. A flicker of recognition finally sparked in her memory. Roger Whitman was a name she'd seen in a business article. Something about Whitman Tech. She nearly asked him about it, but decided to let him bring it up if he wished. For now, she was content to share a conversation with someone who seemed genuinely enthralled by art's power to merge with technology. Neither realized that this quiet stroll marked a turning point for both of them, a silent recognition that, on this night, something significant had been set in motion. The hidden truth in Roger's briefcase was that her own diary lay in wait, carrying words that had unknowingly bound them long before they'd exchanged even a single word face to face. Hours later, the glow of streetlights softened the edges of the city. In a tucked-away cafe near the Morgan Library, Pamela and Roger sat at a small, round table, steam curling from cups of espresso. The place had a cozy, low-lit charm, with exposed brick walls and shelves lined with art books. Jazz music played softly in the background, providing a gentle soundtrack to their conversation. Pamela found herself laughing more freely than she had in ages. She told Roger about her early days in the museum world, about how she'd left her hometown in upstate New York, lured by Manhattan's cultural tapestry. He listened intently, leaning in as if every word mattered. In turn, he touched on his corporate responsibilities at Whitman Tech, though he avoided diving too deep into the million-dollar figures or the high-stakes nature of his work. Instead, he kept the focus on how technology could unlock new ways of experiencing art. "I imagine your schedule is non-stop," Pamela commented, swirling her espresso with a small spoon. "Running a tech firm must be intense." "It is," Roger conceded, eyes reflecting the overhead pendant light, "but I've discovered that chasing only profits or expansion can be hollow. We should be building something meaningful. For me, supporting creativity is part of that." Pamela's lips curved into a thoughtful smile. The more they spoke, the more his words resonated with the intangible longing she'd poured into her diary. She couldn't have guessed that the man in front of her had not only read her private reflections, but had fallen in love with the woman revealed by those very lines. Suddenly, a snippet of text from her missing diary soared through Roger's mind. "I feel invisible in a crowd of hustlers, like I'm the only one who cares about beauty in the everyday." The familiarity of her real-life presence, her gentleness, and her passion for art made him momentarily speechless. He stared at her, heart pounding, recalling the confession that had so entranced him. She felt alone in the very city where her quiet voice could do so much good. "Are you okay?" Pamela asked softly, noticing the fleeting intensity in his gaze. He blinked, forcing a smile. "Yes, sorry, just got lost in a thought." Then, taking a breath, he continued with cautious candor. "It's refreshing to meet someone who believes so deeply in the power of art. Sometimes, in my circles, people see art as a backdrop, not a focal point." Their conversation drifted on, weaving between anecdotes of museum life and technology's possibilities. At one point, Pamela touched her dragonfly brooch, inadvertently revealing just how precious it was to her. Roger's eyes followed the gesture, remembering each sentence about the grandmother who once told her that a dragonfly symbolized change, self-realization, and emotional maturity. In that moment, the cafe's door swung open, letting in a draft of cool night air. A small group of friends entered, laughing among themselves. One of them brushed past the table, and Roger quickly steadied Pamela's espresso cup to prevent it from toppling. The slight interruption broke the momentary spell between them, yet it also propelled Pamela to check the time on her phone. She realized it was nearing midnight. "I should probably head home," she murmured, her cheeks flushing with a combination of contentment and the lateness of the hour. "Tomorrow's a busy day at the museum." Reluctantly, Roger nodded. He felt a pang of disappointment, but recalled that he'd already stretched this evening far beyond what he'd dared hope for. He signaled for the check, and as they stood to leave, Pamela hesitated by the door, a flicker of shyness crossing her face. "Tonight was unexpected," she said, her tone unguarded. "I rarely make spontaneous plans with someone I just met." Roger allowed himself a quiet chuckle. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he replied. "I don't always do this either. Spontaneity is not exactly my strong suit, but I'm glad we crossed paths." They stepped out onto the sidewalk, a gentle breeze carrying the faint smells of roasted coffee and city asphalt. The area was quiet, save for a few passing cars and the twinkle of distant skyscraper lights. For a moment, they simply regarded each other, two near strangers brought together by an event neither had truly planned. Before she could second-guess herself, Pamela pulled a small note card from her purse, scribbling her number on the back. "In case you want to continue our talk about technology and art," she offered with a bright smile, though there was a nervous edge to her voice. Roger accepted the card, his heart thudding. This was real, no longer just an abstract longing triggered by her written words. "I'd like that," he managed, carefully slipping it into his wallet. They parted with a warm handshake that felt strangely charged, each heading in opposite directions. The streetlights illuminated Pamela's figure as she walked away, her posture still exuding that quiet mix of determination and reserve. He watched until she disappeared around a corner, then turned, letting the night air fill his lungs. As he made his way back to his penthouse, Roger replayed every moment in his mind. He thought about the lines she'd written in her diary, describing her desire for a connection that saw beyond her timid facade. "I want to be known for who I am, not who I pretend to be in polished conversations." It stunned him how closely tonight's interactions mirrored those private admissions. He was smitten, and the knowledge that she had no idea he possessed such intimate insights into her heart tangled his emotions in knots. Yet part of him thrilled at the idea of continuing this journey. She was more than the gentle words on a page. She was vibrant, inquisitive, and talented. He'd fallen for her soul before ever meeting her face, but now that he'd seen her, the pull was even stronger. This is the woman, he told himself, a heady sensation overtaking him. The simple girl who dropped her diary on the subway, and the millionaire CEO who discovered it, falling in love before he even knew her name. He reached his penthouse, flicking on the modern recessed lights. The diary waited inside a drawer in his study, seemingly pulsing with potential revelations. He could no longer view its return as merely a moral obligation. It was also the key to forging a deeper bond, if he could manage to share the truth without shattering the fragile trust he'd begun to build. For now, though, he decided he would keep it hidden a bit longer. He was intoxicated by the possibility of letting the connection grow without the baggage of that confession. Little did he know, secrets have a way of surfacing, and the more they remain buried, the more explosive their eventual revelation can be. Less than a week after their chance meeting at the Morgan Library, Pamela and Roger were strolling together in Central Park. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across winding paths and gilded the vibrant autumn leaves with a soft glow. Tourists snapped photos of the skyline, while joggers wove through the crowds, nodding politely. The park felt like a refreshing oasis from Manhattan's relentless pace, and Pamela relished the chance to talk freely, away from the museum's formal atmosphere or the high-powered vibe of Roger's world. She'd been pleasantly surprised when Roger asked to see her again so soon. He'd texted, referencing her note card. "How about we trade boardrooms for a walk in the park? I owe you a proper conversation." Something in his tone had been inviting, almost earnest. Now, they meandered past the Bethesda terrace, occasionally pausing to admire rowboats gliding across the lake. Pamela clutched her light sweater, savoring the crisp air. "It's funny," she mused. "I've lived in the city for several years, but the park never gets old. I come here to think, to decompress." Roger nodded, hands in his coat pockets. "Same. Whenever the chaos of the office gets to me, a brisk walk here reminds me there's more to life than deadlines." He cast her a sidelong glance. "So how's the museum treating you these days?" A small smile curved her lips. "Busy, but rewarding. We're finalizing everything for Digital Horizons. My team's in overdrive, collaborating with tech startups, hashing out interactive prototypes. Every day feels like a new puzzle. Sometimes it's overwhelming, but I love it." He noticed her eyes light up when she spoke about the exhibit, echoing the diary entries he'd read. He'd been enthralled by how her pen spilled raw enthusiasm, tempered by anxieties about her place in such a grand institution. Now, hearing it in her voice only deepened his admiration. They found a quiet bench beneath a canopy of fiery orange maples. Settling side by side, they gazed at the scattered leaves swirling around their feet. Roger sensed her mind was somewhere else, and he gently asked, "Something bothering you?" Pamela hesitated, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. She'd been turning over a thought all afternoon, uncertain how to broach it. "I guess I'm wondering about, well, who you are exactly. I know you're Roger Whitman, CEO of Whitman Tech, but that's basically the public persona. I can't help feeling there's more you're not sharing." His heart jolted. Indeed, there was more, far more. He tried to keep his composure. "I run a tech company, yes, but that doesn't define me entirely. I used to be more hands-on with creative projects, even had a fleeting dream of studying design back in college." He paused, carefully selecting his words. "Then the family business needed me, and I took on Whitman Tech. It's complicated." Pamela studied his face, noticing a tinge of regret in his expression. "Sometimes I wonder if I've made choices that sideline my real passions too," she admitted softly. "But then I remind myself that curation is a form of art in its own right. We both make sacrifices for our careers, don't we?" He reached for her hand, grazing his fingertips lightly over hers. To his relief, she didn't pull away. "We do, and occasionally we get reminders that life is bigger than a job title. Meeting you felt like one of those reminders." A warm flush crept up her cheeks. The air between them crackled with a tension that was at once gentle and charged. As their eyes locked, she felt that same flutter she'd experienced in the cafe, an unmistakable connection. But even in that moment of intimacy, a small voice in her mind whispered how little she truly knew about him. Yet she pushed the doubt aside, letting the comfort of his presence envelop her. They spent another hour winding through paths, stopping to watch a street performer play violin near the Bow Bridge. Roger found himself reveling in the sound of her laughter, in how she made even the smallest observation about the city feel poetic. But under the surface, guilt gnawed at him. Each spontaneous date, each spark of growing affection was a step deeper into the quicksand of his unspoken secret. Eventually, he accompanied her back to her Upper East Side apartment building. They lingered by the entrance, ignoring the curious glances of passers-by. Roger hesitated, wanting to kiss her but unsure if it was too soon. The air was thick with possibility. Pamela glanced at the building's doors, then back at him, biting her lip in hesitation. She felt drawn toward him in a way that startled her. She was typically slow to open up, yet something about Roger bypassed her defenses. Taking a small leap, she moved closer, letting their shoulders brush. "Thank you for today," she said, voice light. "I needed this," he smiled, gently placing a hand at her waist. "So did I." Their gazes locked, and in that moment, the city's noise seemed to dim. He leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to her cheek. A soft exhale of breath escaped her lips. Had it been another context, another time, she might have stepped back. But tonight, standing under the faint glow of the building's exterior lamp, she let the warmth of his touch linger. "Take care, Roger," she whispered, stepping back only when she could feel her heart hammering. "I'll talk to you soon." He nodded, looking both elated and conflicted. "Count on it." As she entered the lobby, he remained on the sidewalk for a few seconds, collecting himself. Eventually, he turned and walked away, the rhythmic click of his shoes on the pavement echoing with each step. Upstairs, Pamela leaned against her apartment door, eyes closed. A part of her glowed with the thrill of this budding romance. Another part worried. It felt surreal. Was she letting her emotions run away with her? She couldn't deny that each conversation with Roger felt more natural, more deeply connected than any relationship in recent memory. Still, she wanted to know more. What truly drove him? What hidden corners of his life he hadn't shown yet? She told herself that trust took time, that real intimacy was a gradual unveiling. But unknown to her, Roger's conflict raged with every new glance, every new kiss. He had read her diary. He had fallen for the woman on those pages before he ever laid eyes on her. Passion warred with fear, forging a secret that could either bind them together, if handled with honesty, or tear them apart once it came to light. Pamela never considered herself a fan of glamorous charity events, but tonight she found herself stepping onto a marble floor in a grand banquet hall on the Upper West Side. The space was all glittering chandeliers and tall windows that framed the city lights. People in formal attire mingled, sipping champagne and discussing philanthropic endeavors in hushed, elegant tones. She'd been invited due to her rising profile at the Guggenheim. Apparently, the museum's donors hoped to celebrate the upcoming Digital Horizons exhibit. Dr. Peterson had encouraged her attendance as a chance to network. Mark Johnson was also there, working the room with polished ease, his suit impeccably tailored. The entire gathering felt slightly surreal to Pamela, who preferred the quiet intensity of an art gallery. Still, she put on a confident face, aware that building relationships with potential patrons could bolster the exhibit's success. On the opposite side of the hall, Roger Whitman walked in, exuding a subdued confidence. His presence turned a few heads, especially among the business crowd. Since he and Pamela had begun seeing each other, he found himself contemplating the nuance of her world more than ever. Stepping into museum-affiliated social circles was a change of pace from his usual corporate galas. But tonight, he was here for one reason only: to share in her triumph and support her. He hadn't announced his arrival to her beforehand. Part of him sought to surprise her with a friendly face in the swirl of high society. Another part dreaded the possibility that Mark Johnson or another colleague might mention the diary. The mere thought made his stomach twist. But he pushed the worry aside, scanning the crowd for Pamela. He soon spotted her near a lavish flower arrangement, chatting politely with two older patrons. She wore a midnight blue gown that accentuated her lithe figure, her hair in an elegant updo. A subtle thrill coursed through him at the sight, momentarily eclipsing his fears. Quietly, he made his way across the polished floor until he stood within her peripheral vision. When she glanced over, her eyes widened in warm recognition. She excused herself from the patrons and moved toward Roger, a grateful smile forming. "I didn't realize you'd be here," she said softly, her tone laced with both surprise and delight. "I wanted to show support," he replied. "I hope that's okay." "Of course." A blush tinted her cheeks, recalling their last tender exchange in front of her apartment building. She was about to say more when Mark Johnson approached, holding a flute of champagne. "Pamela," Mark greeted, all too smoothly, "and Roger Whitman, correct?" He extended his hand with a practiced grin. Roger shook it, maintaining a polite facade. "That's right." Mark angled his posture to include Pamela. "I recall you mentioning Digital Horizons the last time we spoke," he said to Roger. "Pamela's been working non-stop on it." His tone dripped with cordial politeness, yet there was a glint in his eye that Pamela had learned to be wary of. "Yes, she mentioned the exhibit," Roger replied carefully. "I'm impressed by her vision." Mark nodded, sipping his champagne. "I've heard about your involvement in the tech sector. Fascinating synergy, really, art and technology. Didn't I see you with some sort of notebook the other day?" Pamela tensed, though she didn't immediately grasp the significance of Mark's remark. Roger's chest tightened, a flush creeping into his neck. This is it, he thought, dread coiling through his stomach. Then Mark snapped his fingers. Ah, yes, a brown diary, wasn't it? An interesting item for a high-powered CEO. I thought I recognized its cover from somewhere. Possibly from the time Pamela was telling me about losing hers on the subway. Quite a coincidence, if I recall. The words fell like an anvil in the gilded atmosphere. Pamela went deathly still, her pulse hammering. For half a second, her mind refused to process Mark's insinuation. The crowd noise around them receded into a murmur, her vision tunneling on Roger, whose face revealed a complex mix of alarm and guilt. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Roger, you had a brown diary?" He cleared his throat, attempting to salvage the moment. "I can explain." Mark let out a faux innocent laugh. "Oh dear, I didn't mean to intrude, just an odd detail I recalled, that's all." He raised his glass as if in a toast, then drifted away, leaving disaster in his wake. Pamela's heart pounded so violently she felt dizzy. "Tell me this isn't true," she managed, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. Did you find my diary?" The expression on Roger's face confirmed everything before he even spoke. "Yes," he said quietly, "I did. But I promise I was going to—" She took a step back, her stomach churning. The humiliation and betrayal roared through her like a tempest. The man she'd opened up to, the man she'd begun to trust, had been reading her most private thoughts all along. Heat flared across her skin, her eyes stinging. "How could you?" she choked out, voice trembling. "That diary wasn't just random notes, it was everything. My secrets, my fears, my critiques of people at work, my whole internal world." He reached for her arm, desperation in his voice. "Pamela, please, I never meant to deceive you. I fell in love with your words before I even met you. I was afraid you'd push me away if I told you." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, tears now glistening openly. "You fell in love with me? Or with the idea of me you created while reading behind my back?" She shook her head, stepping beyond his reach, ignoring the curious glances of nearby guests. She felt acutely aware of every eye in the room, the polished floors, the opulent decor. She had nowhere to hide, no diary to retreat into. Everything was raw, exposed. Roger tried again. "I'm sorry. I was going to tell you. I swear, it just got harder the more I realized how much I cared, but each word sounded hollow in the echo of her heartbreak." Pamela swallowed, forcing her shoulders back. She wasn't going to crumble here in front of all these people. She turned her gaze to him, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You had every opportunity to be honest, but you chose not to. I can't do this right now." She fled the scene, brushing past glamorous guests who parted like the sea. Her chest felt tight, and her mind reeled with every possible worst-case scenario. The moment she'd always feared, someone reading her innermost confessions, had come true, and it was the very person she'd allowed herself to care for. Anger, betrayal, and an acute sense of loss tore through her, overshadowing everything else. Roger stood frozen, the champagne fizzing in glasses around him as if mocking the rupture of the evening. He felt the weight of Mark's gaze from across the room, but all he could see was Pamela disappearing through the ornate doors. He cursed himself under his breath. The wound he had never wanted to inflict was open, raw, and bleeding. How could he repair something he'd broken at its core? Pamela Clark paced restlessly around her apartment, the lights off despite the late afternoon hour. Outside, autumn sunshine streamed through the windows of Manhattan's Upper East Side, but she kept the curtains drawn. She hadn't slept well in days, haunted by the devastating revelation at the charity gala. Each time she replayed Mark Johnson's smug insinuation, that brown diary. Didn't I see it with Whitman? Her stomach knotted. Worse was the stricken look on Roger's face when she confronted him, confirming her worst fears. She dropped onto her couch, face buried in her hands. Her phone had vibrated incessantly over the last few days. Calls, voicemails, texts from Roger that she refused to answer. Though part of her longed to hear him out, to find some thread of justification, the larger part was overwhelmed by betrayal. He'd read her private pages, the raw confessions she never intended to share. And then he'd chosen to keep it hidden. Twilight fell, seeping blue-gray light into the living room. Pamela rose, stumbling into the kitchen to make tea. The small kettle hissed and whined, a lonely sound echoing in the quiet. Her mind drifted to all the notes she'd scrawled in that diary about her career ambitions and insecurities. How many times had she described her fear of never being understood, of longing for someone who could appreciate her behind her timid exterior? It burned to realize that, for Roger, her vulnerability was laid out like a map, guiding him to win her trust under false pretenses. Tears pricked her eyes, and she slammed the kettle down, almost scalding herself. No, she wouldn't let herself fall apart completely. She'd worked too hard to earn her place at the Guggenheim. Digital Horizons was on the brink of opening, and Dr. Peterson expected her to finalize details for the grand unveiling. She had to function. There was no choice. Her phone buzzed again. She glared at the screen. Roger Whitman. Another text. Another voicemail. Without reading or listening, she set it aside. Frustration twisted inside her, mixing with heartbreak. Guilt also flared because a tiny corner of her heart missed his warm presence, but she couldn't face him now. Suddenly, a brisk knock sounded at the door. Pamela tensed. If it was Roger, she wouldn't be able to avoid a confrontation. She peered through the peephole and felt a wave of relief. Olivia Chen. Opening the door, she found her best friend wearing a concerned expression, takeout bags in hand. "Pam, I've been worried," Olivia said softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You're not answering my calls either." Pamela managed a wan smile. "Sorry, my head's in a bad place." Olivia set the bags on the kitchen counter and gave Pamela a tight hug. "Mark told me what happened. He didn't gloat outright, but I could tell he was enjoying the drama." "Are you okay?" Pamela bit her lip, tears threatening. "Not really. I feel like I'm exposed. My private thoughts were in that diary, Liv, and Roger read them, used them to—" She choked on the words. "I don't even know if what he felt was real." "Oh, Pam." Olivia's voice was equal parts sympathy and anger. "I get why you're furious. He betrayed your trust. But from what I've seen, he genuinely cares for you. Don't let Mark's meddling overshadow that. You need to hear Roger's side at least." Pamela pulled away, wiping her cheeks. "I can't. Not yet. I can't talk to him. It's like I don't even know how to look at him without picturing him flipping through pages I never meant him to see." She gestured at the dark living room. "I've just been shutting down." Olivia sighed. "I'm not here to push you. Just promise me you won't spiral. The Digital Horizons opening is in less than 2 weeks, and you're the lead curator. You have an entire team counting on you. Don't let Roger's mistake sabotage all you've built." Pamela pressed her trembling hands against the cool marble countertop. "You're right. I can't let this derail me completely. The exhibit matters too much." She exhaled shakily. "Thank you for bringing dinner." They sat together on the couch, picking at stir-fry and spring rolls. Olivia gently steered the conversation toward the exhibit, what else needed to be done. How Mark was trying to save face after the board discovered he had overshadowed some budget lines, and how Dr. Peterson was praising Pamela's vision. Slowly, the tension in Pamela's shoulders eased. She realized she needed to channel her pain into something constructive. When Olivia finally left, promising to check in daily, Pamela found herself alone in the hush of her apartment again. She stared at the city lights outside her window, an endless sprawl of possibility and heartbreak. Her phone still glowed with Roger's unanswered messages. Summoning a flicker of resolve, she scrolled through them. Sure enough, there were texts, each more urgent than the last. "Please, Pamela, let me explain. I never wanted to hurt you. I'm sorry for everything. I fell for you before I knew who you were, and by the time I realized, I was terrified of losing you. Call me back. I'll wait as long as it takes." Her chest constricted. She wanted to throw the phone across the room, but she settled for locking it and placing it face down on the coffee table. Sleep would be a long time coming, if it came at all. At midnight, she finally dozed off on the couch, a half-empty mug of tea by her side. In fitful dreams, she saw the diary's pages fluttering in a gust of wind, scattering all her secrets along the subway tracks while distant train lights blurred. Each time she lunged to retrieve them, an invisible hand pulled them away, leaving her hollow and alone. She woke just before dawn, face damp with tears. She sat up, heart pounding, realization flooding her. She couldn't continue like this. She needed to reclaim her sense of self, both at work and in her personal life, even if it meant forging forward without Roger or the illusions of safety she'd once clung to. Morning arrived with grey clouds and a persistent drizzle that clung to the city's skyline. Pamela trudged into the Guggenheim earlier than usual, hoping to avoid awkward run-ins and to focus on finishing crucial tasks. She wore a simple black turtleneck dress and low heels, her hair tied in a no-nonsense bun. The reflection that caught her eye in the museum's glass entrance showed a woman who looked older than her 32 years. 2 weeks of emotional turmoil had carved faint worry lines around her eyes. She headed straight to her office, ignoring Mark Johnson's passing nod. Once inside, she shut the door, flicked on a desk lamp, and powered up her computer to tackle the updated floor plans for Digital Horizons. She had an entire schedule to finalize: installations, lighting tests, staff training for interactive components. The opening was just days away, and the city's art press had begun inquiring about preview tours. A knock interrupted her thoughts. She tensed, expecting Mark, or maybe an assistant with urgent questions. Instead, Claire stepped in, an envelope clutched in her hand. "Hey," Claire said softly. "A courier dropped this off about 10 minutes ago. It's addressed to you, specifically." Pamela accepted the envelope, noticing no return address. Her name was scrawled in bold, slanted handwriting, and something in her gut twisted. She suspected who might have sent it. "Thanks, Claire," she murmured. Claire hesitated. "You doing okay, Pamela?" "You've been, more reserved than usual." Pamela forced a small smile. "I'll be fine, really. Just a lot on my plate." She didn't want to lie, but the last thing she needed was staff gossip. "Thanks for bringing this by." Once Claire left, Pamela stared at the envelope for a long moment before slipping her finger under the seal. Inside was a short letter and a separate folded page. Immediately, she recognized the letter's opening line: "Pamela, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I want you to know that every day since the gala has been agony. I'm sorry, truly and completely." Her pulse kicked. She'd refused to listen to his voicemails or read his texts, but something about a handwritten letter felt different, more tangible. She skimmed the paragraphs where Roger explained how he'd found her diary on the subway that day. He wrote about the initial plan to return it, how her words had captivated him in ways he never expected, and how, with each page, he felt a startling connection. He admitted his guilt, how he knew it was wrong to keep reading, to withhold the truth once they met, but fear had paralyzed him. "I wish I'd told you right away. The more I got to know you, the real you, in person, the more I was convinced you'd never forgive me for invading your privacy, for crossing this line. I fell in love with the woman on those pages because she was so genuine, so brave in her honesty. And when I met you, that same honesty shone through, if only in glimpses. It terrified me to lose that. Pamela's heart pounded as she reached the end. Enclosed is a page from the diary you wrote after that big meeting at the Guggenheim, a moment you were so proud of. I'm returning it to you as a symbol. The rest is here too, safe. But I know it doesn't belong to me. I want you to have everything back, if you can bear to see me again, to collect it. Hands trembling, she unfolded the second paper. Indeed, it was one of her diary's pages, her distinct handwriting describing the day Dr. Peterson praised her for championing a new artist. Pamela felt a flood of emotions, anger, yes, at the intrusion, but also an undeniable wave of tenderness. He kept this safe, she thought, and now he's offering to return it all. Her thoughts tumbled in confusion. She carefully refolded the letter, slipping it and the page into a desk drawer before attempting to refocus on her tasks. The hours crawled. She couldn't stop replaying Roger's words. I fell in love with your mind before seeing your face. Despite everything, a part of her still believed him. She typed up emails to exhibitors, confirmed shipments of interactive gear, but her mind drifted. She recalled the nights they'd spent strolling in Central Park, the quiet warmth in his voice whenever she mentioned a new idea for the exhibit. By mid-afternoon, she found herself at a stalemate, her cursor blinking on a half-written email. She realized she needed a moment to breathe. Slipping out of her office, she made her way to a less-traveled corner of the Guggenheim's upper floors, an enclave she often used to gather her thoughts. Standing by a window that overlooked Fifth Avenue, she clutched the letter in her jacket pocket. Was it too late for them? The betrayal was significant, but so were her lingering feelings. Maybe, after Digital Horizons opened, she could meet him, if only to retrieve the rest of her diary, to end this chapter properly. Steeling herself, she decided, no matter how hurt she was, she wouldn't allow the heartbreak to devour her career or her identity. She could maintain distance, at least until the exhibit was launched. Then she'd decide whether to face Roger with forgiveness, fury, or both. The day of the Digital Horizons opening arrived in a rush of final checks and breathless anticipation. The Guggenheim buzzed with activity from dawn, electricians tweaking projector alignments, tech teams calibrating sensors, and staffers positioning signage to guide visitors through the newly transformed galleries. Pamela, donning a sleek black pantsuit that signaled both professionalism and style, navigated the swirl of controlled chaos with an intense focus that belied her inner turmoil. On the main floor, Dr. Peterson greeted arriving journalists and donors. Pamela, perfect timing, he said, waving her over. The press will be here any minute for a sneak preview. You'll lead them through the first interactive display, correct? She nodded, forcing a calm smile. Of course. Everything's in place. Her voice betrayed no hint of the personal crisis she still wrestled with. She had resolved to be fully present tonight, ignoring the heartbreak that lurked behind her professional composure. Claire and Joshua rushed past, checking on final touches. Mark Johnson roamed the periphery, quietly observing. Over the last week, Mark had maintained a subdued presence, perhaps realizing his role in Pamela's public humiliation at the gala hadn't endeared him to the museum community. Nonetheless, there was a polite truce. He offered occasional nods, and she returned them without warmth. Their working relationship was purely transactional now. As evening descended, the Guggenheim's iconic spirals lit up in shifting hues of purple and blue. Guests arrived in a steady stream: artificianados, tech industry figures, curious influencers. Among them were longtime donors who had initially doubted the exhibit's modern direction, but they now appeared intrigued by the buzz. Pamela kicked off the evening with a brief welcome speech. Standing atop a small platform, microphone in hand, she scanned the crowd. Anxiety fluttered in her stomach when she considered the possibility of Roger's attendance, but she pressed on. "Good evening, everyone. Digital Horizons is the Guggenheim step into the next era of art and technology. Our goal is to show how digital innovation can elevate, challenge, and expand the artistic experience." She paused, heartbeat thrumming. "This project has been a labor of love for our entire team. Thank you to everyone who supported us." Applause reverberated through the rotunda. Pamela exhaled, stepping down to guide the first group toward an immersive installation. They entered a darkened chamber lined with floor-to-ceiling screens. As visitors walked in, motion sensors tracked their silhouettes, converting movements into swirling neon patterns projected across the walls. Gasps of delight rippled through the crowd as they realized they could paint the room with their gestures. With each successful demonstration, Pamela felt a surge of triumph. This was what she'd worked for, an art experience that bridged the distance between observer and creation. The excitement around her was palpable, reinvigorating her sense of purpose. She led donors through subsequent galleries, where VR headsets transported them to curated digital landscapes, or interactive sculptures responded to the presence of the curious. An hour passed in a blur, filled with exclamations of wonder and the flash of cameras. At the final installation, City Echoes, people lined up to see their personal data transformed into fractal designs on massive curved screens. Everywhere Pamela turned, she saw faces lit by the glow of new possibilities. In that moment, she forgot her heartbreak, until she caught sight of Roger standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. He wore a charcoal suit and an expression that mixed pride with caution. Their eyes locked, sending a jolt through her. The hush of adrenaline she'd been riding all evening faltered, replaced by a tumult of emotions. She made a conscious effort not to falter in front of onlookers. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the group demonstration, continuing to speak about the piece, as if unmoved. Yet the moment the demonstration ended and the crowd began dispersing, she felt Roger's presence approach. He kept a respectful distance, hands clasped. "Congratulations," he said quietly, eyes searching her face. "This is remarkable." She drew a breath, ignoring the hammer of her pulse. "Thank you." A pained silence settled between them. The swirl of guests parted around them like a gentle tide. "I didn't know you'd come." His voice stayed low, laced with humility. "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome. But this exhibit means so much to you, and I needed to see you succeed." He hesitated, scanning her expression. "You've done something extraordinary here, Pamela." Her eyes drifted to the neon fractals on the screen, longing to lose herself in their luminous patterns. "That's kind of you to say." She kept her tone guarded, uncertain whether she was ready for a serious conversation in the middle of the biggest night of her career. "I'm glad you appreciate the exhibit." Across the gallery, Dr. Peterson beckoned, waving her over for a photo with a major sponsor. Pamela seized the opportunity. "I have to go. Please excuse me." The words emerged more brusquely than intended, but she couldn't handle a deep confrontation here. There was too much at stake, and her emotional armor was stretched thin. Roger nodded, stepping back. "Of course, I'll just look around. But if you find a moment later, I'd welcome the chance to talk." She gave no immediate response, pivoting toward Dr. Peterson, yet as she walked away, her chest tightened with a confusing ache. She could sense how his eyes lingered on her, how the crowd's laughter and applause felt suddenly hollow. Part of her hated that he was here, reminding her of the diary's betrayal. Part of her, maybe a larger part than she'd care to admit, felt oddly relieved, almost grateful that he hadn't abandoned her entirely. Throughout the rest of the opening, she caught glimpses of Roger drifting from one installation to the next, never interfering, never pushing her for a conversation. He simply observed, quietly respectful. That strange combination of devotion and remorse in his posture made her heart twist with conflicting feelings. Late in the evening, after the final wave of guests began to disperse, she found him again near the museum entrance, gazing up at the Guggenheim spiral ramps with a faraway look. In that fleeting second, she realized she couldn't avoid him forever. If she wanted closure, or possibly a second chance, she'd have to summon the courage to speak her truth. But with cameras still flashing and a few patrons milling about, the moment wasn't right. Instead, she walked past him without a word, hugging the edges of the crowd. Tomorrow, maybe. Tomorrow, she told herself. She would decide then. The following evening, after the electrifying success of Digital Horizons, Pamela found herself seated at a small cafe near the museum, a quiet spot she sometimes used as a personal retreat. Tonight, though, her purpose was clear. She'd texted Roger an hour earlier, agreeing to meet him away from prying eyes. She sipped a lavender-infused latte, while her foot tapped nervously against the table leg. Memories of the opening night still swirled in her mind, especially the sight of him watching her from a distance. Something in his demeanor had seemed so genuine, the same mixture of admiration and regret she'd sensed in his letter. She was tired of the emotional stalemate. She needed answers and a path forward, whether that led to forgiveness or a final goodbye. At last, the cafe door opened. Roger stepped inside, scanning the room until his gaze landed on her. Approaching slowly, he removed his overcoat, draping it over a chair. "Thanks for agreeing to see me," he said quietly, settling into the seat across from her. She nodded, folding her hands around her mug. "I only have one question at this point," she began, voice tight. Why keep the diary a secret for so long?" His shoulders slumped. "I've asked myself that every day. Honestly, when I first found it, I intended to turn it in, but your writing drew me in. Your insights, your hopes, your struggles. I felt connected. Then, when I realized it was you, I panicked. I knew I should have told you immediately, but I was afraid you'd hate me if you found out how much I'd read. The more I got to know you in person, the more that fear grew." Pamela let out a shaky breath. "You had so many chances, Roger. We had conversations about honesty, about trust, and the entire time you were hiding the most personal invasion imaginable." He reached into his bag, pulling out a package wrapped in plain brown paper. "I brought the diary," he said, sliding it across the table. "Everything is here, including the page I sent you. It belongs to you." She stared at the package, her heart twisting. The mere sight of it brought back the sting of violation. But she also felt a pang of relief. Finally, her private words were returning to her hands. She swallowed hard, uncertain whether she even wanted to read them again. "Thank you," she managed, resting a hand protectively on the package. Silence stretched between them. The cafe's ambient hum of conversation and clinking dishes felt miles away. "Roger," she said at last, "do you understand how deeply this hurt me?" "Yes," he whispered, "and I'm sorry." She exhaled, fighting tears. "I believed in us. I thought we had something genuine." He leaned forward, eyes shining with regret. "We did. We do. Everything I said, every moment we shared, that was real. The diary introduced me to your mind and heart, but it was you, the living, breathing Pamela, who made me fall in love." Those last words struck her like a chord she both wanted and dreaded to hear. She clenched her jaw, her eyes glistening. "Don't you see how unfair that is?" she asked, voice trembling. "You had a window into my soul, but I knew almost nothing about you. How am I supposed to trust anything now?" He raked a hand through his hair, clearly at a loss. "I've asked myself the same question. I can't force you to trust me again. I can only hope you'll consider the possibility that my feelings were genuine. I'm ready to tell you anything about my life, my work, my past regrets, if it means you'll give me a chance to earn your trust." Pamela's gaze dropped to the diary on the table, her emotions a tangled knot. Part of her wanted to fling the package in his face and storm out. Another part screamed at her that they shared a rare connection, something she might never find again. "I need time," she managed, voice subdued. "This isn't just about your regret. It's about me feeling robbed of my own privacy." He nodded, acceptance lining his features. "I understand. Take all the time you need." They both sipped their drinks in uneasy quiet. 1,000 memories of their laughter, their strolls in the park, even that magical evening at the Morgan Library, danced in her mind. She recalled how easily she opened up to him, feeling seen for the first time in a long while, only to realize he'd been seeing her far longer than she knew. Finally, Roger cleared his throat. "How's the exhibit reception going?" She offered a slight shrug. "Incredible. The press coverage is positive. Attendance is high. I should feel ecstatic, but everything feels overshadowed." "I'm proud of you," he said, sincerity unwavering. "You achieved something groundbreaking." She softened just a fraction. "Thank you." Glancing around, she noticed that the cafe was emptying, a few patrons bundling up against the chill wind outside. She realized how exhausted she felt, emotionally drained, unsure if she could muster more discussion tonight. Gathering her courage, she met his gaze one more time. "I can't give you a definitive answer yet, Roger. The hurt is too fresh, but I'll think about this, about us." He looked down, hiding the flash of sadness in his eyes. "That's more than I deserve," he said quietly. They stood, and he helped her slip into her coat. A small, familiar gesture that once would have felt comforting now sent a ripple of conflicting emotions through her. As they headed to the door, she clutched the diary package in her arms like a shield. Outside, they paused under the lamplight, the city's roar muffled by evening calm. "I'll wait for your call," he said, stepping aside to give her space. She managed a brief nod. "Good night, Roger." With that, she turned and walked away, the diary pressed tightly to her side. Though she didn't look back, she could sense him there, watching her disappear into the maze of Manhattan streets. And as she pressed onward, her thoughts churned. Could she ever move past this betrayal, or was it the cost of genuine intimacy that one must risk such devastation to find something real? Days turned into a week after the tense meeting in the cafe, and Pamela found herself approaching the Guggenheim with a different stride, a new sense of resolve settling into her bones. Digital Horizons was a resounding success. The exhibit's interactive nature drew crowds of all ages, and the museum's daily attendance soared. Reporters praised Pamela's innovative curation, lauding how she and her team had blended the Guggenheim's classic space with avant-garde experiences. Inside the museum, she spotted Dr. Peterson in conversation with a group of young artists. He waved her over enthusiastically. "Pamela," he said, voice brimming with pride, "I was just telling these folks how your exhibit has become a cornerstone of our modern outreach. Congratulations again on making history here." Heat blossomed in her cheeks. "Thank you, Dr. Peterson, but it was definitely a team effort," he chuckled, patting her shoulder. "You're too modest. Enjoy this moment. You've earned it." She nodded, excusing herself with a polite smile. Wandering through the exhibit's main gallery, she paused to watch a cluster of visitors interacting with a motion sensor piece. Their delight reminded her why she'd poured so much of herself into this project. For a moment, the swirl of heartbreak receded. She felt accomplished, recognized, almost whole, yet the diary, now safely at home, beckoned every night. She'd opened it just once, reading her most recent entries before the day she lost it on the subway. The rawness of those final lines had made her heart twist, but something else stuck out. She'd written about craving genuine human connection, about wishing someone would see her intimately. The irony wasn't lost on her. Roger had certainly seen her in that way, though not as she'd intended. In the corridor, she nearly collided with Mark Johnson. He stiffened, stepping back. "Pamela," he greeted flatly. And then, to her surprise, he added, "I know we've had our differences, but I wanted to say your success is well-deserved. The board is impressed." She studied him warily, uncertain if another cutting remark lurked behind his calm tone. Instead, he seemed subdued. "Thank you," she answered, polite but guarded. Mark hesitated. "Look, about the charity gala. I may have, made a poor joke at the wrong time. I know it caused you grief. I didn't intend to sabotage everything between you and Whitman." Pamela's brow furrowed. "Your words had consequences, Mark, but I appreciate the acknowledgement." He nodded, as close to an apology as he might ever come. With that, they parted ways. The tension that once defined their interactions felt muted now, overshadowed by bigger concerns. She exhaled, heading for her office to gather some paperwork. Later that afternoon, she stepped out for a break, strolling a few blocks away to a quiet juice bar. While she sipped a fruit smoothie, her phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. "Heard from Roger. How are you holding up?" Sighing, Pamela typed back, "Still sorting through things. We'll fill you in soon." She'd yet to decide on a path. Her anger had dulled to an ache, but the question of forgiveness loomed large. That evening, as she rode the subway home, she glanced around the crowded car, remembering the day her diary first slipped from her grasp. She felt a pang of nostalgia, as if that was a different lifetime. Stepping off at her stop, she resolved to revisit the diary in full. She needed to face her own words, not to find an excuse for Roger's behavior, but to see if her heart still yearned for what she'd confessed in those pages. After dinner, she sat on her living room floor, the diary open in her lap. Page by page, she traced old reflections. Her insecurities about speaking up in meetings, the surge of confidence after Dr. Peterson praised her, her whimsical romantic hopes. Flashes of memory swept through her, the sense of being unseen, the budding desire to be recognized, the vow that she'd chase authenticity even if it scared her. By the time she finished, tears flowed freely, not just of pain but of growth. She saw how far she'd come, how the museum's success mirrored her internal evolution. She'd stepped out of her comfort zone, found her voice, and led a groundbreaking exhibit. As she closed the diary, an understanding crystallized. She no longer needed it as a refuge. It was a record of her journey, but her real life was unfolding beyond those pages. A calmness settled over her. Yes, Roger had invaded her privacy, but he'd also given her a glimpse of what it felt like to be wholly cherished, at least in the moments that were genuine. She believed his remorse was real. The question now was whether she could accept that the path they'd traveled was irrevocably marked by this betrayal, or if they could rebuild something new out of honesty. That night, she sent him a brief message. "I've read it all. I think I'm ready to talk again." The reply came minutes later. "Anytime, anywhere. I'm here." The next morning, she arrived at the Guggenheim to find an email from Dr. Peterson praising her leadership skills. Attached was a formal proposal offering Pamela the chance to helm another exhibit, a more permanent role as a lead curator for innovative projects. She stared at the screen, heart pounding in disbelief. It wasn't a guaranteed promotion, but it was a formal step toward that future she'd once only daydreamed about. A shaky laugh escaped her. She thought of the diary entries describing how she craved recognition and a deeper role in shaping the museum's direction. Finally, it seemed the door was opening. She set aside her phone, rereading Dr. Peterson's message with a grin. For the first time in weeks, she felt a surge of pure joy. No matter what happened next with Roger, she knew she'd emerge from this ordeal stronger. The betrayal had forced her to confront her own fears, to step out from the protective shell of her written words. Now, the reward was more than a job opportunity. It was the discovery that she could own her future, her voice, and her choices. A sense of release washed over her, and she closed her eyes briefly, silently thanking the twists and turns that had led her here. Even heartbreak, it seemed, could guide her toward a more authentic version of herself. Pamela arrived early at the Guggenheim, a discreet glow of determination lighting her features as she passed through the museum's glass doors. Dr. Peterson's proposal for a lead curator role weighed on her thoughts, exciting and daunting in equal measure. She slid into her office, dropping her coat on the chair and flipping on the desk lamp. Outside her window, Manhattan hummed with its usual morning rush. Inside her heart, though, she felt an unusual calm. Late the previous night, she and Roger had agreed to meet again, an honest conversation this time, away from the intense swirl of career milestones and past betrayals. The sense of resolution she'd found while rereading her diary still gave her strength, reminding her that whatever path they chose, she had grown far beyond the timid person who once scribbled her confessions in secret. She opened her laptop to scan the day's schedule. Before she could click on her inbox, there was a knock. Claire's face appeared at the door, bright with excitement. "Pamela, Doctor. Peterson just mentioned that he wants to officially announce the expanded curator position next week. Words getting around that they plan to highlight digital horizons as the pinnacle of modern curation. That means you'll be front and center." Pamela's pulse kicked. "I'm still waiting on formal details, but it looks promising," she said, fighting a smile. Claire grinned. "It's more than promising. Everyone's talking about it. A real permanent lead curator for future-forward exhibits. That's you." Warmth spread through Pamela's chest. She'd once dreamed of exactly this, a chance to shape the museum's direction, bridging the gap between traditional art forms and the digital frontier. The diaries, her lost and found confessions, had led her to articulate those dreams more boldly. "Thanks, Claire. I appreciate your support." Once Claire left, Pamela leaned back in her seat, glancing at her phone. She and Roger had agreed to meet at a small garden behind the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a place neither of them frequented, ensuring privacy. Before heading out, she took a moment to gather her thoughts. Yes, she still felt the echo of betrayal, but she also believed in the possibility of growth. She couldn't ignore that her own vulnerability had, in a strange twist, led her to this professional breakthrough. By late morning, she slipped from the Guggenheim, politely declining Mark Johnson's questions about the new role. The walk to the Met took her along Fifth Avenue, the crisp autumn wind rustling fallen leaves at her feet. Each step felt purposeful. The idea of seeing Roger again made her stomach flutter, but she clung to her newfound clarity. She wasn't the same woman who had relied on her diary to process every emotion. She could handle an honest, face-to-face reckoning. Upon entering the Met's side gardens, an open yet tranquil space with well-manicured shrubs and a scattering of benches, she spotted Roger near a low stone wall. He wore a simple navy coat, his expression somber yet hopeful. When their eyes met, he offered a tentative smile. "Thanks for coming," he said softly, hands tucked in his pockets. "I wasn't sure you'd want to meet again so soon." Pamela nodded, approaching until they stood a few feet apart. "I've thought a lot about everything," she began. "About the diary, the breach of trust, about what it meant for us." His gaze flickered with concern. "I won't rush you. Whatever you want to say." She inhaled deeply, exhaling a cloud of white in the chilly air. "I don't want to linger in anger forever. That doesn't mean I've forgotten the hurt, but I've also seen how I've grown these past months. The diary used to be my crutch. When I lost it, I was forced to find my voice out in the open. In a strange way, that loss pushed me to become who I am now." Roger nodded. "I understand. And for whatever it's worth, I'm proud of the woman you've become, though I know you didn't need me or the diary to achieve that." She studied him, noticing the genuine remorse in his posture, the softness in his eyes. A part of her longed to fall into his arms, to recapture the warmth they once shared. But another part demanded careful steps. "You said you fell for me first through my words," she said, voice quieter. "I can't pretend that doesn't unnerve me. Even now, it's like you had an unfair advantage." He swallowed, meeting her gaze. "It felt like I was reading a story so beautiful, I couldn't look away. By the time I realized how intrusive it was, I was already enthralled. I know that doesn't excuse my decision to hide it. I'll carry that regret." Pamela exhaled, the faint wind tugging at her hair. "I've accepted that what's done is done. The question now is if there's a future for us that's built on honesty, not secrets." Roger stepped closer, a cautious but earnest gesture. "I want that more than anything. I won't lie or omit truths again. I can't promise I won't ever make mistakes, but I promise to face them openly." She stared into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she felt tension ease in her shoulders. "I'd like to try," she murmured, "but it has to be on new terms. Trust has to be rebuilt, and I won't rush it. We take it slow, no illusions, no hidden corners." He nodded, relief washing over his features. "Whatever you need, I'm here." For a moment they stood in silence, the city's muted rumble in the background. Then she gently took his hand. The touch was brief, tentative. Yet it spoke volumes, of a wound not fully healed, but no longer bleeding. She let her fingers slip away after a moment, a promise that she would choose closeness at her own pace. "Let's walk," she suggested, gesturing to a path that curved around the garden. "We can talk about something simple, like favorite childhood books." Roger laughed softly. "Childhood books? Sure. I had an obsession with space adventures. I wanted to be an astronaut at age 7. Pamela managed a small grin. "I was all about art history encyclopedias and old photo albums from my grandparents." They began strolling side by side, tentatively weaving small anecdotes into the air. Though unspoken tensions lingered, their step-by-step conversation represented a new beginning, a choice to step forward rather than dwell on the past. After half an hour, they paused by a small decorative fountain. She realized with mild surprise that she felt lighter. In the absence of the diary's overshadowing guilt, they were forging a connection as two flawed people seeking something real. They'd have to revisit the painful memories eventually, but for today, cautious laughter and open honesty were enough. As they parted, he offered to walk her back. She declined, insisting she needed time alone to reflect. But she thanked him for understanding. At the garden's exit, they lingered in a silent farewell. No hugs or kisses this time, just the promise of possibility. She turned away, heading back toward the museum district. With each step, her heart softened a little more, awakening to the notion that from betrayal could come a deeper intimacy, if both parties chose vulnerability over fear. And in that moment, she felt ready to take that risk. A week of cautious contact followed, marked by quiet text messages, brief phone calls, and a shared understanding that they were rebuilding piece by piece. After years of confiding her fears to private pages, Pamela found the shift to open communication jarring but also liberating. She was discovering how to articulate her needs, clarity, patience, and above all, unwavering honesty. One chilly morning, while sipping coffee in her now less cluttered apartment, she decided to bring Roger deeper into her life, on her own terms. She'd arranged a private tour for him at the Guggenheim. Not a grand event, just a casual after-hours walkthrough of Digital Horizons, where they could talk about the art, her process, and what truly fueled her passion. As evening fell, Roger arrived, stepping through the museum's massive doors. The main lights were dimmed, with only a few gallery lamps illuminating the exhibit. A security guard nodded respectfully at Pamela, recognizing her as the curator. She had cleared the arrangement with Dr. Peterson, who seemed pleased that she was extending the museum's vision to those she trusted, and she was making a deliberate statement. If she was to share herself with Roger again, it would be through the realm she held most sacred, her creative domain. He wore a casual blazer and jeans, looking slightly nervous but also eager. The hush of the museum's after-hours silence felt surreal. "I've never been in here when it's this quiet," he said softly, glancing around the spiraling ramps. Pamela managed a small smile. "It's like discovering a different side of this place. No crowds, no flashbulbs. Just the art and us." They started with the interactive VR installation that used motion sensors to paint patterns with the viewer's movements. Roger watched in awe as faint beams of light traced their silhouettes. "This is stunning," he murmured. "You conceptualized it, right?" She nodded. "I collaborated with the artist, Elena Laramie, but I pushed for deeper interactivity. I wanted people to feel like they weren't just observers, but co-creators." A poignant glance passed between them. Roger recalled one of her diary entries describing how she often felt like an observer in life, too afraid to participate. "And now you're leading them to co-create. That's powerful," he said. They moved on to City Echoes, the installation that used aggregated data from visitors to form fractal visuals. He took a turn, stepping onto the pressure pad that captured basic biometric information: heartbeat, footsteps, posture. The swirling neon shapes on the wall responded, shifting color and pattern in real time. "How does it feel?" he asked. "To know thousands of people come here and reveal these details, even if only partial?" Her lips twitched in a brief smile. "It's voluntary, and we never store the data. But yes, it's a paradox. They share something intimate to create something beautiful. That's the trade-off for a meaningful experience." Roger's eyes settled on her. "Like being vulnerable in a relationship." The question cut through the darkness, as delicate as it was direct. She met his gaze, heart pounding. "Yes," she admitted, "like that." They continued through the galleries, drifting into deeper conversation about her new lead curator opportunity, her vision for future projects, and how she'd initially hidden in the safety of her diary. She spoke candidly about her struggle to open up face to face. "When you read my diary, you saw a side of me I never showed publicly," she said, pausing beside a display. "I always worried that if people saw the real me, my insecurities, my fears, they'd push me away." Roger touched her arm lightly, ensuring she was comfortable with the contact. "I know I violated your boundary. I can't change that. But I can choose how I move forward. I won't let your transparency be something I exploit ever again." Her chest tightened with emotion. In the silent corridors, a swirl of colored lights danced across their faces from a nearby projection. She believed him, that sincerity in his voice was undeniable, but trust was a fragile thing, not rebuilt overnight. "I need you to understand," she said. "I'm not guaranteeing a fairy tale from here on out. I still feel the sting of betrayal. But I also care about you, and I don't want to lose what we've started." He exhaled in relief. eyes glistening. "I'm grateful for any second chance. You have no idea." At the final gallery, they paused before an experimental piece that merged digital visuals with live streaming from an artist's studio. Pamela explained how the artist's real-time brushstrokes fed directly into a digital matrix, layering paint and pixels simultaneously. "We watch creation unfold in real time," she said softly. "Imperfections and all." Roger gave a crooked smile. "Sounds a lot like us, figuring out how to blend two worlds, revealing imperfections in the process." She gave a small nod. "Yes, I guess so." They lingered, taking in the slow bloom of color on the screen. Each brushstroke was a leap of faith, an act of vulnerability for the artist. The parallel wasn't lost on either of them. In that hush, Pamela turned toward Roger, letting her hand slip into his. This time, she didn't withdraw. The simple gesture felt like a choice, a step forward. He squeezed her fingers gently, no words necessary. Finally, they retraced their steps to the lobby, where dim emergency lights cast soft shadows on the sleek floors. Outside the front doors, night had fully fallen, leaving Fifth Avenue bathed in street lamps. She paused, peering out at the city that had once felt so impersonal. Now it was a place where she'd found her voice, and perhaps a second chance at genuine love. "Thank you for showing me this side of the Guggenheim," he whispered, returning her gaze, "and thank you for letting me in, even a little." Pamela inhaled the stillness of the museum's after-hours air. "I can't promise we'll be perfect," she said, "but we can be real." He nodded, eyes bright. "That's all I want." Without further hesitation, they stepped out onto the steps, the echo of digital horizons at their backs. The future still held uncertainty, but for the first time since the diary debacle, Pamela felt a potent sense of hope blooming in her chest, hope that perhaps the real art in life was forging imperfect connections, trusting that shared honesty might transform even the deepest scars into something beautifully human. A few days later, the museum's official press event arrived, dedicated to celebrating digital horizons and revealing the Guggenheim's plans for future innovative exhibits. The crowd gathered in the main rotunda, cameras flashing as reporters jostled for position. Pamela stood with Dr. Peterson near a small podium, the hush of excitement permeating the air. Mark Johnson lingered on the periphery, acknowledging attendees with polite nods. The tension between him and Pamela had cooled to a distant civility, especially given Dr. Peterson's open support of her. Claire and Joshua hovered nearby, giving Pamela encouraging thumbs-ups. In the crowd, Olivia grinned from behind a group of staff, mouthing, "You're amazing." Pamela's heart warmed at the sight. As the event began, Dr. Peterson stepped up to the microphone, welcoming everyone. He introduced board members who praised the museum's heritage and trajectory. Then, with a proud smile, he called Pamela to the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me present the driving force behind Digital Horizons, the visionary who brought this exhibit to life," Dr. Peterson announced. "Pamela Clark, our junior curator, whom we are proud to recognize for her significant contributions. In fact," he paused for effect, "I'm delighted to confirm that Pamela has accepted a newly created lead curator position focusing on emerging art forms. We see a bright future under her guidance." Applause thundered through the rotunda. Pamela stepped up, face flushed with both nerves and exhilaration. She briefly glanced at Roger, standing inconspicuously at the back, an unreadable expression of pride etched across his features. Taking a steadying breath, she addressed the crowd. "Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to stand here," she began, voice quivering slightly. "When I started at the Guggenheim, I dreamed of bridging traditional art with technological innovations. Digital Horizons is the fruition of that dream, but it's also a collective effort. my amazing team, our forward-thinking artists, Dr. Peterson's mentorship. Now, we plan to expand, inviting even more creators to redefine art in the digital age. She paused, scanning familiar faces. Art is, at its core, about connection. And this exhibit taught me that authentic connection between creators, curators, and audiences requires vulnerability. I believe the best art emerges when we aren't afraid to push boundaries or expose the raw edges of ourselves. Her throat tightened momentarily, the memory of how she herself had been exposed resonating. Yet she pressed on. I'm thrilled to step into this new lead curator role. Thank you all for your trust and support. Flashes blinded her for a moment as photographers captured the scene. Dr. Peterson offered a hearty handshake, then guided her off stage to field reporters' questions. As she navigated their inquiries about her plans, about what kind of exhibits the museum would host next, she felt a surge of quiet confidence. She answered openly, all the while aware of Roger's presence in the background. When the formalities ended, donors and VIPs mingled around. Pamela slipped away to a quieter corner by the spiral ramp, letting the adrenaline ebb. That was when Roger approached, hands in his pockets, a soft smile curving his lips. "Congratulations," he said, voice low. "That was inspiring." Pamela tucked a stray hair behind her ear. "Thank you. It still feels surreal." He nodded, stepping in closer. She caught a faint whiff of his cologne, a comforting scent by now. "You've earned it," he said earnestly. "I've never seen anyone so determined and so full of heart." Her gaze flickered around to ensure they weren't drawing undue attention. "I suppose it's official now," she said, letting herself smile for real. No longer the anxious junior curator scribbling in a diary. He studied her face. "But that diary was part of your journey," he replied gently, "and I'm sorry I intruded on it. If it helps, I've come to respect the power of sharing thoughts consensually rather than reading them in secret." She swallowed. There it was, the unspoken tension still between them. Yet somehow the air felt lighter. "Yes," she said, nodding slowly. "It does help to hear that." Before she could say more, Olivia swooped in, hugging Pamela from behind. "Lead curator! You unstoppable force!" Olivia exclaimed, her warm grin crinkling her eyes. She glanced at Roger with a polite smile, acknowledging the complicated dynamics without intruding. "I'm stealing her for a celebratory dinner with some of the team. You'll join, right?" Pamela looked uncertain, glancing at Roger. He smiled with gentle acceptance. "Go enjoy with your colleagues. This is your night." Her lips parted in a tentative grin, touched by his graciousness. "We'll talk later," she promised, lightly squeezing his arm as Olivia whisked her away toward a group of staff members clinking champagne glasses. Roger watched from a distance as she entered the cheerful throng, receiving praise and toasts. A swell of pride mingled with a bittersweet pang that their relationship still hovered in an in-between state. Not quite fully reconciled, yet no longer broken beyond repair. He found himself recalling the earliest diary entries he'd read, where she questioned her own competence and her fear of being overshadowed by more outspoken colleagues. Standing there now, confident and celebrated, she was a testament to her own resilience. After chatting briefly with Dr. Peterson, who thanked him for supporting the museum's new digital expansions, Roger decided to slip out. The night belonged to Pamela, and she deserved the spotlight. He stepped into the crisp air outside, the swirl of city lights reflecting his conflicted mood. Every step away from the museum felt like an acknowledgement that, despite the progress, they still had to carefully piece their bond back together. Meanwhile, inside, Pamela clinked her glass with Claire and Joshua's, her mind half occupied by thoughts of Roger's discreet exit. She couldn't deny the tug of longing. But for now, she was grateful for the space to celebrate her professional triumph, a victory that felt like the culmination of every self-doubt she'd poured onto diary pages, every risk she'd taken in real life. Later, as the crowd began to thin, she slipped upstairs to her office for a moment of solitude. She gazed at the city through the window, the skyline a patchwork of glowing windows and neon signs. This was her life now, on the cusp of something bigger, more confident. A wave of gratitude coursed through her, not just for the museum's recognition, but for her evolving sense of self. She thought of Roger, how he had become a strange catalyst to her growth, painful but transformative. Perhaps that was the nature of trust, sometimes shattered before it could be reforged into something even stronger. Over the next month, Digital Horizons continued to draw record numbers. Pamela spearheaded additional seminars, inviting local tech innovators to speak about the role of augmented reality and AI in the art world. Young curators from other museums asked her for advice, seeing her as an emerging authority on digital curation. She spent hours mentoring interns, encouraging them to explore bold concepts without fear of judgment. It became clear that her new position as lead curator wasn't merely a title, it was an evolving responsibility. Dr. Peterson asked her to pitch a long-term vision for the Guggenheim, mapping out the museum's next 5 years of cutting-edge shows. She poured her heart into it, collaborating with staff across various departments. Mark Johnson, although maintaining a distance, grudgingly acknowledged her leadership. Now and then he contributed insights or data she needed, and the rest of the time he kept to his own exhibits. In parallel, her personal life unfurled at a more gradual pace. She and Roger spoke by phone regularly, exchanging anecdotes about their days. Sometimes they chatted for half an hour about new creative projects or the complexities of running a tech empire, yet both were mindful not to leap into romantic gestures too quickly. They'd meet for occasional dinners or strolls through Central Park, cautious about letting each moment unfold organically. One crisp Saturday morning, Roger invited her to Whitman Tech's main office for a private tour. She hesitated at first. After all, she was well aware of the power imbalance that once cast a shadow over them. But curiosity and a desire to understand his world better nudged her to accept. She recalled how he'd once told her about wanting to integrate more arts and creativity into his company culture. Now she wanted to see if he'd followed through. They met in the gleaming lobby, polished marble floors reflecting overhead LED panels. Roger stood by the reception desk, greeting her with a subdued smile. "Welcome to Whitman Tech," he said. "I realize it's a far cry from the Guggenheim spirals." Pamela looked around, intrigued. The space exuded modern efficiency, with glass walls revealing corridors lined with sleek desks. Employees scurried about with purposeful strides, occasionally glancing her way. "So this is where you craft your digital empire," she teased lightly, hoping to dissipate the lingering tension. He chuckled, in a manner of speaking. "Come on, I'll show you something I've been working on." They rode the elevator to an upper floor, stepping into what looked like an open layout innovation lab. Large screens displayed prototype apps, and a few relaxed seating areas were scattered among whiteboards filled with scribbles. At the far wall, Pamela noticed a series of mounted canvases, bright, abstract paintings that seemed at odds with the corporate vibe. "Wow," she murmured, stepping closer to the artwork. "Did you commission these?" Roger joined her. "In a way. I asked employees to create pieces reflecting how they envision the company's future. We then digitized them, projecting them during company events as evolving backdrops. It's not as grand as your museum installations, but I'm proud of the collaborative spirit." Pamela felt a pang of admiration. "This is wonderful, Roger. You're giving them a voice beyond spreadsheets and project deadlines." He nodded, gazing at the paintings. It's a small step, but it's changed the atmosphere here. People feel valued for their creativity, not just their output. Turning to her, he added, I might not have pursued these ideas if I hadn't read about your passion for blending art and everyday life. It opened my eyes to what was missing in my own company culture. The mention of her diary-triggered influence made her spine tense, yet she couldn't deny a sense of quiet gratification. Something positive had emerged from the breach of trust, if only in these intangible ripples of inspiration. I'm glad, she replied softly, even if it came from complicated beginnings. He met her eyes. Maybe we can reshape it into something good, not a justification, but a second chance. She exhaled, letting her guard down slightly. Yes. A second chance can still hold meaning if we build it with honesty. They continued exploring the workspace, greeting a few team leads who recognized Roger. One stopped to praise the new art initiative, while another eagerly demonstrated a prototype for an employee wellness app. Pamela looked on, impressed by their enthusiasm. The more she saw, the more she glimpsed a side of Roger that resonated with her, a leader who genuinely sought to integrate humanity into a fast-paced corporate environment. Eventually, they reached a quieter lounge area with large windows overlooking Midtown. There, a coffee machine and plush chairs invited them to sit. Pamela accepted a cup of cappuccino, turning to watch the bustling streets below. This city never stops, she mused. Sometimes it feels like we're chasing it, trying not to get swallowed up. True, Roger agreed, settling beside her. But I think we're learning how to stake out our corners of it, places where we can slow down and breathe. Pamela nodded. She toyed with the edge of her coffee cup, reflecting on how she'd once poured her anxieties into a diary she guarded fiercely. Now, her life felt more open, even with its challenges. She glanced at Roger. In the gentle quiet, she felt comfortable enough to reach for his hand. He responded by interlocking their fingers. The moment felt calm, unforced, a subtle testament to the slow repair of trust. They chatted for another hour, discussing upcoming exhibits and the possible crossovers between Whitman Tech's philanthropic ventures and the Guggenheim's educational programs. Nothing was decided, no grand announcements made, just the seed of a future collaboration that might blossom if nurtured with care. When they finally parted ways, he walked her to the lobby. She paused by the door, meeting his gaze. I'm proud of what you're doing here, she said, voice gentle. It's good to see you finding your own creative outlet. His face lit with gratitude. Thank you. It means a lot coming from you. She gave a small nod, stepping out onto the sidewalk. As the city's cacophony enveloped her, she felt a new sense of alignment. They were two individuals, each forging a path that honored both their ambitions and their growing emotional bond. Not perfect, still healing, but forging ahead nonetheless. And that, she reflected, might be the most authentic kind of art life could offer. Several more weeks passed, carrying with them a gentle rhythm that allowed Pamela and Roger to nurture a relationship shaped by candid communication. Digital Horizons maintained its high attendance, and Pamela settled into her lead curator responsibilities, juggling daily tasks with a fresh sense of authority. She no longer felt the need to hide in the diary's pages. Her spoken words seemed to carry more weight than any secret writing ever did. One Friday afternoon, she invited Roger to her apartment for a quiet dinner. The evening air was cool, hinting at the coming winter. With Olivia's help, she had rearranged her living space to reflect her new chapter. Fewer stacks of art books gathering dust, more airy corners, a couple of lively green plants near the window. When Roger arrived, he carried a bouquet of lilacs, their subtle scent filling the entryway. Lilacs, Pamela said, smiling. My grandmother loved these. She always said they symbolized renewal. The memory of her grandmother reminded her of the dragonfly brooch, which now rested safely in a small decorative box on the bookshelf, waiting for special occasions. Roger offered a grin, a mild flush coloring his cheeks. "I remembered you mentioned them once. Thought it'd be nice to bring a bit of that history tonight." She found her heart warming at his attention to detail. Leading him into the kitchen, she showed him the simple dinner she'd prepared: roasted vegetables, a hearty lentil stew, and fresh bread from a local bakery. It was modest, but full of comforting aromas. While they worked side by side, ladling stew into bowls, the tension that once hung between them felt almost like a distant memory. They ate at her small dining table, illuminated by a soft overhead light. Between spoonfuls of stew, they spoke about everything from the next Guggenheim exhibit to Whitman Tech's philanthropic expansion into art education. Occasionally, a comfortable lull in conversation allowed them to savor the familiarity building between them. After dinner, Pamela cleared the dishes while Roger tidied the table. They reconvened in her living room, where she had placed the diary, her once constant companion, prominently on the coffee table. It looked almost out of place in this more open environment, its cover a reminder of the vulnerability and hurt that had once enveloped them. Roger's eyes flicked to the diary, then back to her. "Are you comfortable keeping it out like that?" he asked gently. She nodded, settling onto the couch. I've made peace with it. The diary served a purpose, but I don't rely on it the way I used to. It's part of my story, not the full story." He hesitated, then took a seat beside her. "I'm relieved to hear that. I know it was a source of pain." Pamela rested her hands in her lap, considering her next words. "You know, when I reread it after you returned it, I realized I was clinging to a version of myself, someone who was too afraid to speak up. In a way, losing it forced me out of that shell." He nodded, empathy etched across his features. "I wish you hadn't been forced. I wish I'd just handed it back immediately. But I am grateful I got to know the real you, even if it started in the worst way possible." The sincerity in his voice melted her guarded composure. With a quiet exhale, she reached out, placing a hand on his. "Roger, we can't change how this began, but I believe in what we're building now. It's not perfect, and I'm sure we'll argue or face new challenges. Still, I'm not that woman hiding behind pages, and you're not the man concealing your intentions. We're here, openly, right?" He squeezed her hand gently. "Absolutely." The warmth in his eyes gave her courage. Leaning forward, she brushed a tender kiss against his lips. It was neither urgent nor hesitant, just a slow affirmation of the closeness they had fought to reclaim. His arms slipped around her waist, pulling her closer. For a moment, the city's distant hum faded into nothingness. They were left with the steady pulse of their shared breath, the faint swirl of memories, both painful and liberating, and an unwavering sense of yes. When they finally drew apart, Pamela rested her forehead against his. "We keep talking," she whispered, "whenever something feels off. We don't let fear push us into secrecy again." He nodded, voice low. "I promise, never again." They fell into a companionable silence, her head resting on his shoulder. He traced lazy patterns on her back, each touch reminding her that real intimacy came with risk. But she realized now that it also came with possibility of being fully seen, fully understood. Eventually they moved to her balcony, a small space overlooking the city's glittering skyline. She handed him a mug of tea, taking one for herself. Together they leaned against the railing, watching headlights weave through Manhattan streets. A gentle wind ruffled their hair. Pamela took a sip, letting the warmth settle in her chest. "You know," she said, "my old diaries spanned years of my life, various moments I was too afraid to share out loud. I don't regret writing them, but I don't need them the same way now. I think I'm ready to write a new story, one that isn't confined to private pages." Roger smiled, slipping an arm around her waist. "A new story with a collaborative author, maybe." She laughed softly. "Yes, a co-authored life, where we both get to add chapters, mistakes and all." Behind them, the lights from her apartment cast a soft glow onto the balcony. Below, horns honked and city life rushed on. Above, the night sky offered a quiet infinity. Pamela felt the diary's weight no longer as a chain, but as a stepping stone that had led her to this point. Leaning closer to Roger, she breathed in the promise of what lay ahead. While the city remained restless, a sense of peaceful finality settled within her. She'd found the courage to speak openly, to trust carefully, and to build a relationship shaped by honest connection. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Just the ongoing process of two hearts learning to see and be seen. And that, more than any exhibit or diary entry, felt like the most transformative work of art she could ever create. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.